Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 6 of the Ark Podcast. We've got a phenomenal lineup of topics today. What we'll be going through is Albanese, the Australian government bringing in a 50-kilometre speed limit in urban and regional areas, soon to drop in 40-kilometre zones in New South Wales and Victoria. Anthony Albanese is set to pour $90 million into going after anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. How is Australia's new ute tax affecting Australians? Taxpayers, money going to the NDIS revealed to be funding sex work, tarot card reading and crystal healing. Anthony Albanese's dog Toto claims $200 a week in food expenses. Sydney's micro cities plan revealed. Where are they going to put 30,000 more people? Nigel Farage takes his place in the UK Parliament with his fellow reformers. What are the migration patterns of millionaires around the world? The UK media froth over new Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer as he releases convicted rapists back into the UK streets early. Japanese elder stunned to hear that London is only 36% white. Joe Biden refuses to drop out of the race, triggering a Democrat civil war, almost as bad as with Bernie Sanders in 2016. Pope Francis sounds the alarm on populism, alluding to the dangers of Trump. Ben Shapiro testifies before Congress in the USA, clashing with Democrats on social media censorship. Maajid Nawaz sounds the alarm on a global coup facing the world. And the project sees a rare outburst of truth on the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got some familiar faces today. On my far right, I've got Sky News commentator Dr. Stephen Shavura, who is also a contributor to Campion College, where he teaches European and Australian history. I've also got Adam Dobson on my right. Adam is an app creator, business owner, family man, an Australian of Zimbabwean descent, and a phenomenally intelligent guy on South African and Zimbabwean history. And on my left, I've got Elvis Sinosic, former MMA fighter, gym owner, family man, business owner, candidate in the upcoming council election for Bankstown and Canterbury, which we'll be talking about, and also a former candidate for both the UAP in getting Senator Ralph Babbitt elected, and also John Ruddock elected for the Libertarian Party in New South Wales. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we can get through everything. I really do. If you're enjoying this content, if you like tuning in every week, thank you so much for your support. Please click the link in the description. Become a regular donor. Donate a cup of coffee a month. It goes a long way. But without further ado, let's get into the news. Top priority, and I was really upset when I saw this. The idea that Sydney councils are pushing to drop the speed limit down to 40 kilometres an hour in urban areas, in local areas. This is something that I've found out was actually rolled out not only in New South Wales in a few council areas, but also Victoria in some areas. Now, Clover Moore, most loved person in Sydney, she pretty much is the one reason why we have bike lanes in the city, congesting traffic even more. She claims that this is going to help reduce the amount of fatalities on the road. There are others, she says, this is what studies have shown. There are also claims that this is also going to reduce congestion on the roads by reducing it down from 50 Ks to 40 Ks. They're even alluding to even taking it even lower to 30 kilometres an hour. Guys, you're business owners, you're family men, you're people in the community, people that have been paying taxes for longer than I've been alive. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, I think a lot of the stuff they're doing in regards to safety comes down to control. They want to, take control of what's going on. Take my child to daycare. There's more than enough traffic. You're not going that fast. Like when there's a lot of traffic, it's not fast. It's not going to make any difference. Most of the time, you're probably traveling slower than that anyway. But at other times, there's no one on the roads. Dropping it down to 40 is not going to be of any benefit. It's just going to slow things down. It's going to create more traffic because it's going to take longer to get places. And I think that's part of the plan. They want to make driving inconvenient to push people onto public transport. By pushing them onto public transport, it's going to move into what we'll talk a little bit later is the mini cities. Because with more congestion, they want people off the road. So how do you get people off the road? You make it inconvenient to be on the road.
Yeah, what do you guys think about this?
100%. They're trying to make driving and private transport as inefficient and unenjoyable as possible, so people will see no difference between driving and taking a bus or a train. It's all about getting traffic off the road. It's just all part of this sustainable utopia that they're just enforcing on us. And there's probably an element of just, you've probably got some neurotic counsellors out there who themselves feel unsafe on the roads or feel that other people are unsafe, and so to cure their own neuroses, they are having to control everyone else. So, as the old saying goes, those who cannot control their own emotions and their own neuroses, they must control everyone else. And I think that's a lot of this as well. But ultimately, this is about getting cars off the road.
I think it was Jordan Peterson who said that, the car is the ultimate embodiment of individual freedom and liberty. And the idea that you can go anywhere and go thousands of kilometers, however quickly you want, really. I want to ask you specifically, Adam, on this. Having been a guide before I went to Zimbabwe 6 months ago, I noticed when I was there that the government seemed, when they came in, they kind of immediately shut down the train lines. And the people driving on the roads, the only people that could really run a business with large trucks were a set few companies that tended to also be large donors to the government in power. Is this a way of funneling and better controlling people and, getting money to the perhaps donors of the parties and, in this country? Is that the sort of pattern we've seen, in other countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing, not talking about Zimbabwe, but South Africa specifically, I mean, they're very good at building amazing networks of roads. They're very good at that. I think the infrastructure train system in South Africa has deteriorated massively. They've just burnt the infrastructure and stuff like that within South Africa. So I don't think it's, politics or money or anything like that. It's just, if you see some of the roads over there and the way that people use the roads over there, it's nothing like here.
Right, yeah.
But, in terms of here, before where I live, over in the North Shore there's a specific road that I cross over every morning where before the pandemic, you just didn't have a hope in hell in crossing the road, so I had to take another way. And since that has happened, I've noticed there's literally hardly any, compared to like 3 years ago. So in terms of these laws, in terms of taking vehicles off there's hardly any of them on them. Most people are working from home a lot of the time anyway, so there's actually not a lot of vehicles. And one of the other things I also found is quite recently they said something on the radio, which is, with the kids around, like, slow down because there's kids around, which was around school holidays and so on, and you get those periods which are, you got all the flashing lights and stuff. And then, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, on the radio it was like, slow down again because the kids are out on holiday. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, I thought it was slow down because they're at school, but now it's slow down that they're on holiday. And the reason I mention that is eventually you just become immune to it. You don't actually listen to it. So I think, I think at the end of the day, it is a control thing, as you mentioned. In terms of getting cars off the road, there's still, I don't think there's even near the numbers that there were before. And, a lot of these roads, you wonder whether it's revenue generating as well, because they change the speed limit. On one road, I've seen it, 4 or 5 times, and it's just a way of getting money as well.
I think it was 3 years ago that and it's not just Labor. I think 3 years ago the Liberals actually were the ones that signed on to this international agreement. One of those World Economic Forum things where they're like, let's sign up to reducing the road down to 30 eventually, down to 30. And I thought, how is that? This so-called study that said it's actually reducing, it's gonna increase flow. How could it? If there's people that it's taking them longer to get where they need to go, that's more aggregate cars
on the road for a longer time. And as a business owner, the majority of my business runs in the evening, 6 to kind of 9 p.m. By the time they get out of there, it can be sometimes 10 p.m. So now we have the problem of, well, if you don't want them in cars, there's not a suitable public transport system in place. Where we are, I mean, there are trains, but they don't really go anywhere near where my business is. So there are a lot of outlying areas that aren't directly near a train station. So what's going to happen to them? They're going to lose business, they're going to lose money. and then eventually have to shut down. And maybe that's what they want, get more people shutting down those small businesses, get them relying on the government. But yeah, if people can't drive, it's going to make my business extremely difficult. And I'm sure I'm not the only business owner in that sort of area that relies on people just being able to drive in. It's like public transport is, if you go and pick up your groceries, you don't want to get on a train or a bus with, a dozen bags of groceries. That's, you drive there, you stick it in the boot or the back seat and you drive home. They get rid of that and that kills walk-in business, but then I guess they'll push people towards online. So, if you can't take your groceries home, then you order it online. But what does that do? That shuts down the small businesses, because now the big retailers, they can handle all the online orders, but the local corner shops can't. They've got no way to get business. People are going to start frequenting them less, and because you can't do your big shops there, they're going to have to shut down. So even your walk-in opportunity is going to disappear. So, yeah, I really don't think it's a good thing what they're doing.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on this is there's a 2-week grace period for those people that are wondering, is this in effect now or is it not? There is a 2-week grace period on this particular rollout. And on top of that, if you think they're just going to end up doing suburban areas and regional areas, they're actually going to do the major arterial roads as well. So this is something that's coming down the pipeline. It's just, it's like frogs boiling in a pot. And eventually we're going to get to the point where all these roads are going to be just undrivable, essentially. I am quite worried about this. And it's interesting that it's the councils that are driving that. And it's at that point I want to actually ask you about your running, Elvis, in Canterbury Bankstown. In which ward?
Bass Hill Ward.
And what are you running on in the area? What are you hoping to bring? So you're running for the Libertarians?
For the Libertarian Party, and what we really want to do is get councils back to doing what councils are supposed to do. They're getting involved in things they shouldn't be: international politics,
The Voice,
gender ideology, The Voice, things that really is not their concern. That's not why we vote them in. They should be looking after local roads. They should be looking after parks and recreation areas, the libraries, and making sure garbage is being handled properly. And I hear a lot of issues in that regard from people, and again, slowing down that traffic is not going to make things better, because as you mentioned, the longer you're on the road, the more traffic there's going to be. So that isn't a good thing. We want to get the woke out. We want to get them back to what they're supposed to be doing. We want to kind of slash a lot of the red tape and shut down, because again, more government just means more rules, it means more bureaucracy, and it's just, as we saw recently, the Australian government has increased exponentially, way more public servants than we need. It's a large part of our GDP, and it really shouldn't be, because it's killing our businesses and small businesses, cutting a lot of that red tape, and just doing the things that are important to the people in the community.
Yeah, I think everyone that's considering running, or you're not sure who to support in your council, will be coming out with some resources on that. But if you're looking to run and you don't quite know where to start, the Libertarian Party in New South Wales is the only one I'm aware of that are putting a campaign together. I'm not sure about Victoria. So the local council elections in New South Wales are in September this year.
Yep.
In Victoria, they're in October. And in October, it's a state election in Queensland. It's all fun on the East Coast in September, October.
And we have no idea what's going to happen with the federal, because there is a chance there may be an early election. It's something that's kind of been up and down recently as well. So you've got to keep that in mind as well.
It could be as early as August 31st and as late as May next year. So I'm preparing. Libertarians are preparing. One Nation's preparing. Not sure what the UAP are doing, but I'll be keeping you guys informed in that and having some of the candidates come through, and I just wanted to mention that. One of the things that are getting in the way of us running campaigns is censorship. Now, before I go into this particular topic, I wanted to tell you a little bit about one of my guests here, who I've been friends with for some time now. Actually, it's a little over a year now, actually. I thought it was a lot longer for some reason.
About a year.
About a year. Adam Dobson is not only a business owner and a family man, he's someone that actually made an app during the pandemic which allowed you to actually see which were the businesses that were allowing the unjabbed into the premises. Now, Adam, I'm going to throw it over to you. Could you mind just briefly telling us, the 2-minute version of exactly what happened, how they shut you down, and what that involved?
Yeah, basically, I actually had an app that I had developed before, and then COVID hit, and I was one of those people that, I needed to go and find or use a cafe, restaurants, all these places that I wanted to go to, and I wanted to find the ones that I wasn't going to get there and there's going to be a problem kind of thing. And I noticed online, I thought, well, it's a problem, I need to find a solution for it. And so I went online and I saw that there were a lot of other people in the same boat. And so anyway, I basically pivoted this app to basically list all the businesses that weren't kind of discriminating, if we can call it that. And it was just really that they were open to, there was going to be no issue going there. And I sent it out. There was a lady that I knew in Melbourne. I sent it out to her and I said, I've got this app and I've developed it and I've basically all these businesses listed on it. And she sent it out to, just did one post, and then literally overnight it was like 3,500 people downloaded the app. And then very quickly I started getting calls from journalists and and they wanted it, and so I just ignored them all. And then they wrote articles about it saying that, it was not the right thing to do and so on and so forth. And so I just kind of closed it down. But there was definitely a need there, and I needed it at the time, and eventually we just kind of parked the app and left it at that. But so that's kind of what happened, and it was a lot of the businesses, there were lots of them that weren't, that were not kind of discriminating and saying, if you haven't been jabbed, you can come in, which I think was fair, because a lot of people felt really isolated from society during that period, and so this was a tool that actually just allowed them to go and connect without the hassle, potential hassle.
That's interesting. It would have been handy to be on that app, but I actually got harassed by the police because I was reported as being an anti-vaxxer. Right. And they were making, I couldn't even go into my own business during business hours because of the situation. And obviously I stayed back because I kind of suspected something like this would happen, but they were turning up regularly for a couple of weeks to my gym to see if I was there and to see who, and they were, and naturally, it scared away a lot of the customers and people because they got these police officers coming in during peak periods, and thankfully they didn't harass any of our members. They just harassed the staff. But yeah, I mean, I'd done nothing wrong. No one had done anything wrong there. And then all of a sudden, just because apparently they got a phone call saying I was doing the wrong thing. And after the first time they came in, I wasn't there, they got my number, they called me and I said, nope, I'm at home, I'm doing all the right things. If I go in, it's only during business hours to do admin, which I'm permitted to do. As soon as the business opens, I'm out of there, not doing anything wrong. And they went, yeah, okay, no problem. But they still kept coming back. And it's like...
Yeah. And people turned on each other. People turned on each other. They said, yep, that business is open. How dare they,
Well, it's hard to think. It's hard to. I mean, I don't know which was the worst thing. These regulations that people were meant to follow, which have since been tossed out, or the fact that Australians were dobbing one another in. I think the latter, actually. It's just amazing. I mean, after one of the protests in New South Wales in 2021, there were tens of thousands of Australians contacting Crime Stoppers, dobbing people in. It's just incredible. It just so revealed a very nasty underside of Australian culture.
It was disgusting. I remember it was the 24th of July protest, 2021. There was 10,000 reports made to Crime Stoppers after that. I know for a certainty I got thousands of those because there were tons of people on TikTok and everywhere. There were articles saying, report these people, these are the protest leaders and all of that. I had a girl literally film herself dobbing me into Crime Stoppers and then putting the camera back on her like, I'm a good person. I've just... Madness. I was just like, this is like Soviet Russia. Like, what is this? Like, Big Brother, 1 in 3 people were informants for Russia, like, during the USSR.
People just became possessed. I mean, it's amazing what you can do to a people if you make them afraid and then give them an other to persecute. And make them feel tribal. they become so docile, they will do almost anything you want. And Australia was meant to be one of the few countries in the world where we don't fall for that kind of thing. But what we discovered is that
Hook, line and sinker.
Exactly. We fell for it hook, line and sinker. And what it proved is something I've thought for many, many years, is that Australians talk a lot about how we're cynical about authority. Australians are cynical about politicians, but we love government. Politicians we don't like. Government, give me more, daddy.
You know what was interesting, Joel, is in those 3,500 people that registered, having looked at their names, there was a clear pattern there of all people that had come from kind of Eastern Bloc countries or with those surnames. So people that had grown up in Africa where they've been living under dictatorships, people that were just like, we've seen this story before. And I think I was surprised. I was absolutely shocked because I had this vision in my mind about who Australia were, how they are and their character. And, they're kind of they got this swagger and this rebellious streak, but just literally everyone just like rolled over. I was completely I couldn't believe it was like the same thing. But yeah, and I think it was disappointing. And the reality is that me personally I didn't even thought about vax or anti-vax or anything like that in my life. I just am a logical thinker, and when this came along, I'm like, hang on, it normally takes 5 or 10 years to develop this. There's no ways they can do it in 1 or 2. I'd rather just sit back and see. And that was literally what I was doing, which is just a logical brain.
Not allowed to do that.
Most people would. And so, I was never in any, in that world of like anti-vax or anything like it. It was just like, no, I would rather just see the evidence because I'm a logical, and how I tackle any kind of problem is like, has it been done before? What's the normal thing? No, okay, well, I'll wait and see. It's like even a business decision. Do you just jump in or do you... So, and then to be labelled on just logical thinking.
Same here. Again, it's just critical thinking was made illegal. I did a similar thing. I'm in the fitness industry. I'm very big. I look at health trends, supplements, training, recovery, all sorts of. So I'm kind of always on that scene. And then as soon as this came out, I started looking into it. I started listening to, the health experts that I've been listening to, and they said pretty much the same thing. They didn't say it's good, it's bad. They said we should wait. We don't have any long-term data. We're not going to get any long-term data. If you jump on board, you're going to become the long-term data. And, from my perspective, it seemed like, the smart choice would be to wait. Healthy, I've got my diet and supplements in place. I look after myself and my family. And I just wanted to wait. And as I said, I wasn't an anti-vaxxer. This was pretty much the platform that launched me into that area and into politics. It was just the first ball that started rolling, and it just steamrolled from there. Like, I wasn't one of those, but I'm more than sure am now.
Yeah,
I'm still today not an anti-vaxxer, but and I think the point is that, people just, you should have the opportunity, if someone makes a decision that way, like I've got all my family and whatever, they will, we took different choices, but it's not like labeling anyone because they took a choice. I just would rather choose this and someone would rather choose that. It's as simple as that. There's no angst amongst them.
But I think that was also like part of the government's plan. It really was a concerted psychological attack. They very much had a very specific goal. They wanted to achieve something. You could see it in the media. You could see it in the people talking about it, whether it was politicians or famous people. They had the same message, protect granny, do it for society. They were really pushing it, and the fear aspect, separating people from their communities with lockdowns and restrictions and LGAs of concern. And so it was a very much coordinated. So I do understand, because there are a lot of people out there that kind of did what they had to keep going and kind of wish they hadn't now. And I think that's starting to become more evident as we move forward.
And the messages, they were very thoughtful because they were put together by behavioural psychologists, by nudge units, particularly in England. And so they did studies, they ran focus groups, and they realized that if everyone's wearing a mask, it makes people fearful and it makes other people more likely to wear one. And so in England, they imposed these mass mask rules, not because they had any good evidence that the masks were going to be very effective, but because it kind of created a solidarity around this particular virus. So it was all very planned, and it had sort of the backing of science in a way.
And it also, you got to remember, it makes it easier to spot those people who are non-compliant. You know, there was a couple of times I was in, somewhere shopping. I think one of the times I was in Bunnings, and everyone's wearing a mask. I'm not. These police officers walk in, and I'm sitting there at the counter chatting away, and I look over, they look at me, and they've just pointed at me, and I just went for my pocket because I had a medical certificate, and then once they've seen me looking for my pocket, they've just waved me away, and back on. They didn't even check. But as I said, it's just very easy to spot those people who are not compliant. As you said, it does make it a group thing. We're all together, we're doing the same thing. But then those people they just stand out. If it's just a choice, it's very hard to tell looking at a crowd who's not making a choice unless you have something physical that separates you from everyone else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think one of the big things you raised about the people that were doing the app, with all these, names from overseas is, it actually raises a very good question, especially ever since October 7th and what happened with Israel and Palestine. A question's been going through my head. What is it that makes Australians Australians? There's a lot of immigrants that have come here that have been grandfathered in, but there's a lot of recent immigrants in the last, say, 10, 15 years. They haven't been grandfathered in. They haven't tried to learn the language, and whether that's in the UK or Australia or the UK. What is it that makes us us? And I've just been trying to wrap my head around that question what are their values? It's clearly not a religion thing because we come from all sorts of religions, but there's a solidarity of Aussie values. What are those values? Topher talks about this. Topher Field talks about this all the time. But
well, actually, I had a interesting thing just this weekend. The rugby was on. I think maybe I mentioned it to you, and it was quite interesting because South Africa. I love the Springboks, and they played. And at the beginning of the game, these three big African guys come on, these warriors with these spears, and they come running into the thing, and it's just such a sight to see. And then anyway, the game starts, and the national anthem starts, and you just see, they call it the Rainbow Nation, and you see all these people, black, white, colours from and they're all just singing as one under one flag. And then the contrast to that was the Australia game, and there's the welcome to country. Make you feel bad about who you are, and what I call it's like the guilt trip thing. And then and it's just this, to me. There's this. We've got two flags. It's divisive. So the question is, what are you actually standing for? And when I look at South Africa, I mean, it's it's a first world country, but they have actually come together. They've actually, that is an example of, in my view, what we should be. We should all be connected together and not be divided. And we are a divided nation. And so until you can identify, and when you look at it, I mean, that's just rugby, but the whole country is behind that one. And sport is a great way to unify people. But they are all, and they got problems in their country, but they're actually united as a you can feel it, you can see it.
I think one of the things is Australians, historically, once upon a time, we were quite united. We were united around a sense of pride of being part of the British Empire. And so we were kind of united around something that wasn't necessarily sort of indigenous to us. It was about Britain. Now, with the decline of Britain after World War II, and then sort of the influx of non-British immigration after World War II, one of the things that really bound us together starts to become increasingly irrelevant. And so what replaces it? And there's a sense in which nothing's really replaced it. And the one thing that kind of brings us together every year, although I actually see that fading now, is Anzac. So if there's a kind of Aussie value or Aussie religion anymore, I would say it's Anzac. But I don't think that's actually going to last over the next 2 decades unless there's a really strong concerted effort by governments like what John Howard did in the 90s to just keep it very, very strong. I think if you were to ask me what really defines Australians, I would say apathy. The things that Australians tend to be passionate about, other than sports, I can think of 1 or 2 things. So strong borders. Both political parties have learned that Australians will not tolerate weak borders. We're just fanatical about being in control of our borders, and that's because we don't have a European history where we've never been in control of our borders. We can control it. And if there's something else, I think The Voice showed that Australians in general want a kind of united, non-fractured country. So there's a sense in which if there's anything that we're quite strong about, it tends to be negatives, or keeping people out, and no sort of basically get rid of the identity politics. But other than that, we're basically apathetic.
Well, I think that brings up 2 good points, actually. One, I think one of the things that kind of defined us was an attitude. It's she'll be right, mate. And, that laid-back attitude, don't stress, just it'll sort itself out. The problem is it doesn't always sort itself out. And I think that really was highlighted over the last couple of years. And the second point it kind of brings up is that divisive attitude. Even though The Voice showed us that we didn't want to divide us, it really did divide the country. And there's a lot of things that have been happening recently that are dividing people, but are on so many different lines. So it's actually not just 2 groups. It's getting splintered into smaller and smaller groups, whether it's The Voice, Ukraine and Russia, Palestine and Israel, gender ideology. There's just so many things, and we're getting splintered into smaller and smaller groups. And as we all know, united we stand, divided we fall. And the more we become splintered on these different topics, and a lot of them, let's be real, aren't relevant to what's happening to us here, but they're making it so important that we're forgetting what the important things are. It's making things very difficult for us to get together and face what we really should be facing right now.
Yeah.
If you think about the, like you were right, John Howard in the 90s, I remember reading a book about him, and around mateship, he really created that energy around mates and being mate and mateship. And that was a big part of the Australian identity. And just this last Australia Day, just, the area I went down to the beach there. I was the only person on the beach that actually had an Australian flag. There was not a single, and I remember, 5 years, 8 years ago, that beach, 10 years, used to be full of Australian flags. So if you are not connected, if you don't have, it's like a missing identity. If you don't have an identity, if the flag is symbol, seen as a symbol that is shameful, then how can you unite under a flag that?
How can you?
And you think about how many? Yeah, and you think about how many countries like England, America, like how many have 2 flags?
Yeah. Like
we drive over the bridge every day, there's 2 flags there. It's like, it's visually, we are divided. Until we come together, it's always so I think that's what's kind of gone missing, is that the mateship's gone. Nobody's got any pride in the flag anymore. And there's an identity crisis.
And that's the downside of the apathetic culture. I mean, there is an upside. We don't have civil wars. But the downside is it means that really bad people can get into positions of immense power and completely change education systems, bring about treaties with Indigenous peoples in states, so effectively declaring other nations within our nation, and a whole bunch of other things. And Australians just and pursue culturally suicidal immigration policies, and Australians just watch it happen, and it's like, gee, that's no good, is it? Gosh.
She'll be right.
Yes, someone should do something about that. And that's kind of the Australian attitude. We just watch things go pear-shaped and then kind of scratch our heads and say, how did we get to this?
Yeah. I feel like I'm in the business of working out why people like Adam didn't just do that. And they were like, no, I'm going to come up with a solution.
Well, because I think part of it is very historical. Australia begins as a penal colony. So it's in our DNA that we are used to government making decisions on our behalf, even without our consent. After the penal, and convicts are also given land, they're given it by government. So again, used to government giving things to us. And the other thing is Australia's such a massive landmass. For the most part, markets and voluntary giving were not able to build things in Australia that could be built in England and built in America, like railroads, telecommunications technology, churches even. All of these things were basically funded by colonial governments because the land was so big, the population so small and so sparse that there was just no market for it. And so it's just in Australia's DNA to say the government will do this. We are uniquely prone to look to government based on our history, our geography, and our tiny population. It's just kind of part of who we are, but it's starting to really destroy our country now.
I think the Tucker Carlson, he came over last week, or whatever it was, a couple of weeks ago, a week ago. And that was a bit of a wake-up call because he's basically like sounding an alarm. He says, listen, you've got a beautiful country here. And we do. We have an amazing country. And I mean, that's why I came here. I think it's the last best place in the world.
Oh, wow.
But, all the other countries, England, the US, whatever, they're getting this mass migration it's just like wiping them out. It's not in the sense that, but it's having a massive effect. And because of where we are and because of our borders and stuff, he's like, don't end up like us. And and the worry is that Australians, as you mentioned, is just like, it should be right. And like, you don't realize how good you've got it until you don't have it anymore.
Yep.
And that's why all those people that download that, all the people that have come from all around the world, is because they've seen what it looks like in the end. And they don't want, that's why they came here.
Yeah.
And I think too many Australians haven't seen that, the end game. And by the time it's, like you boil a, thing in water where eventually by the time you wake up, you're like, oh my God, like everything is buggered. And it's like, well, that's it. You had your chance and you missed it.
What's the nickname for Australia?
Lucky country.
That's right. And what happens to luck?
Runs out.
Always runs out.
Yeah, those that are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it.
That's right.
Who said that?
George Santayana. George Santayana.
Very good, very good. Before we continue, if you guys, I've been monitoring the comments. If you can just make sure these mics work best when it's just under a fist away from your mouth. Don't be shy to move it around and whatever. Going into it after that phenomenal detour, because I actually really enjoyed that, because I think we heard a bit of your different understandings of where Australia's at. That question has been bugging me about how they've been dividing us and what it is that actually unites us as a country, because it's a very unusual. Every country has a unique history, but Australia has a very unusual way it's come about and unique way. But one of the ways they are trying to tear us apart, Elvis, you mentioned the point about Israel, Hamas, one of many things, whether it's men and women or this or that, Israel, Hamas, Jews and Muslims, one of the things that I believe they're stoking the flames is Anthony Albanese has brought in and basically funded a new envoy to the tune of $90 million of taxpayer funding going to address Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. This particular envoy is... Her stated goal is to basically stamp it out. And this was her talking just this week about the sort of things she's going after, just to give you an idea.
The world is changing. Indeed, it has changed. And the rapid dissemination of ideas, as the Prime Minister mentioned, through social media, means that anti-Semitic ideas that once took years to spread can instantly be conveyed and absorbed. The pandemic changed our world. Its legacy is a greater capacity to accept conspiracy theories and disinformation over facts and expert opinions.
This is my fear about that particular story. She and these anti-Semitism laws, these Islamophobia laws, I'm not confident that they're actually going to enforce these evenly at all. The way they do these things is they roll it out and then they selectively enforce it. So they'll go after Islamophobia for people that are against the establishment, basically. They'll roll out the anti-Semitism laws against people that are against the establishment, basically. That's my fear. What did you guys think about that particularly?
Well, look, if they're going to be dealing with it, it should be the Human Rights Commission, but I guess that has demonstrated the last couple of years that they haven't done their job. Yeah, it's just, it does seem crazy. As you said, I think it's more about bringing in further censorship. Like they got rid of, they made it illegal to have the Nazi symbol online and that sort of stuff recently, and now the Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. They're just going to continue to build the censorship, so it gets to a point where you really can't say anything, and it once they get control of the free market, free speech platforms, then it's just going to make it much easier for them to take control.
Here's the thing. How do you define Islamophobia? I mean, the very word Islamophobia was invented in the 1990s in England purely as a way of demonizing anyone who wanted to critique Islam or critique Islamic immigration. It was invented as a propaganda word. Now, Islamophobia literally means fear of Islam. So does that mean, I mean, if you were to take that word literally, does that mean I'm not allowed to suggest that people should be afraid of Islam? Now, that would be a ridiculous thing in a liberal democracy, because people always say things, for example, like, Christianity and religion in general are diseases, they're horrible things. We don't want these things to be too influential in society. And it's their right to do that. Basically, I'm very much opposed to any idea of law or of some kind of envoy whose job it is to stamp out anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I'm a supporter of Israel. I've been a very vocal supporter of Israel, but I actually don't want an envoy whose job it is to stamp out anti-Semitism. What I want is people making sure that there's no one out there who is trying to incite violence. And I'm in favor of really gross forms of obscenity being censored. But the moment you start saying things like we've got to censor anti-Semitism, we've got to censor Islamophobia, then activists get into these roles and they start pursuing their agendas. And so, for example, just a few years ago, Sonia Kruger, the morning show presenter, she was hauled before, I think, the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Tribunal because she said we need to stop further Islamic immigration because it's dangerous. Now, she was making a contribution to a political debate at the time, and that was deemed Islamophobic. So these will all naturally morph, especially the Islamophobia one, that will morph into stopping people from being able to critique Islam as a religion and being able to critique Islamic immigration, Islamic society. And she let the cat out of the bag straight away because she started talking about disinformation, misinformation. Even during the Voice debate, I'll finish in a second. During the Voice debate, I wrote a piece for the ABC on the Voice, arguing against it. I thought it was a pretty considered piece. They must have thought it was pretty considered. They published it. But I know a guy who told me he wrote into the ABC and complained about all the misinformation in my essay. Thankfully, they didn't pull it down. But during the debate on The Voice, no advocates was accused of spreading disinformation. So you can just see where this is going. It's just going to go to censor speech that is deemed politically inexpedient.
Absolutely. And this is the thing I really want to highlight if you guys didn't pick up on that. It's not about man or woman. It's not about black or white. It's not about Jew or Muslim or Christian. These are divide and conquer. It's an age-old conquering mechanism. Something that, Hillary Clinton, she would love to subscribe to this Machiavellian way. It's not about, you got to forget about the tribalism for a second. It's literally a way of controlling us, and they are going to selectively enforce these laws and divide us systematically like that. You've got to remember who you are, where you are, the things happening here, and how you can actually make a change. And I'm talking to the camera here because I have been really angry about ever since October 7th. Not because of what's been happening overseas. there are slaughters of innocents that happen every day in Africa, in the Middle East. We see it with regards to Argentina. And when I see these things going on, it's so selective what they cover. And I'm like, guys, how about we get back to basics? We live in Australia. Unless you're planning on moving and fighting for Israel or fighting for Palestine, let's stick to Aussie topics. This conflict that's 14,000 k's away. People know my feelings on this. My uncle was Palestinian. He was kicked out, when he was 4 months old. They weren't even allowed to take a bottle of milk from him. But he moved here. He made a very successful business, and he lives here with his family, and he has kids and grandkids, and he's flourishing. He didn't stay in that. He was like, yep, I don't like what's going on, but he moved on with his life. But when we get stuck in this, and when our grievances get manipulated and used by the government, that's when we lose. And that's what I'm really trying to push against here, because these laws are going to punish us, all of us, me, Dr. Shavura, everyone on this panel. Our businesses are going to get closed down. And I need everyone to be sober about this. I know it's fun. I know it feels good to be angry, but unfortunately, you're the bull, and they're the one with the red sheet. That's the problem.
Well, it brings up a good point, because what they're doing is creating labels. So by creating these labels, and it doesn't matter whether it's anti-vaxxer, cooker, conspiracy theorist, Islamophobist, racist, it creates these labels that, one, gives people the justification to ignore your argument. The second thing it does is it creates an environment where people don't want to be labeled by these labels. I don't want to be called a racist, so I'm not going to say anything. So what happens is it then limits who's willing to stand up and speak. And it goes back again to what I was talking about with the masks. When you limit who's making these comments, it becomes much easier to control, because people don't want to be labeled. They don't want to speak out. So the people who speak out become very easy to spot, and they become very easy to censor. So the more that these come into place, the more these people are put into positions to censor us, the easier it's going to get, unless everyone is willing to stand up and speak out. And again, as they continue to divide us more and more, that becomes harder and harder.
I think misinformation, disinformation, my spin on that is that basically what we want you to, we'll control what you, that's basically, it's a
Well, it brings up malinformation as well, where they start incorporating. So malinformation is where you're telling the truth, but it's going to harm their reputation. And how long, I have no doubt malinformation is going to be included in the disinformation scenario. So
it's
basically it's not,
what we want to tell you, basically, or what we decide is going to be that. And I think I'm with you. Unless it's real violence towards someone, I think people should be able to say what they want to say, and that's. I grew up in Zimbabwe, and under this dictatorship with Robert Mugabe, and you had to be nervous. You couldn't just say what the fact that you can live in a country where you can actually just say what you want to say. Even between brothers and sisters, people wouldn't want to share that information because they were too nervous of what might happen to that. And we don't want to go down that path.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. A couple of government expenditure stories I wanted to run through with you guys. First and foremost, Anthony Albanese's dog, Toto, has been claiming $200 every week on dog food, just so you know. In other news, the NDIS are basically using taxpayers' money, but the NDIS has funded $35 billion every year. Part of that is some of these people getting psychic healing, tarot cards, sound baths, whatever the hell that is, crystal wand making, and being offered... are being offered this money, and, often there's no cap on it with regards to what can be charged, Crystal healing, for example, and tarot cards could be $95 an hour. You guys are business owners. You guys have been paying taxes longer than I've been around. What did you think about all this?
It's not a good thing. Not a good thing to see. It's, as it is, we're in a massive cost of living crisis, interest rates, inflation, everything's going up, and we're putting all this money into the government, and again, to have this program. And look, I do see the benefits of the NDIS. I can see how it can help people in need, but it seems the people that need this help aren't getting it. Like I've seen a couple of stories where people are in like really bad situations. They need the money, they need the help, they need the therapists. They can't get it, but somehow these people are getting these sort of crazy things. And again, it just comes down to the bigger a government gets, the bigger the bureaucracy. There are going to be people who know how to play the system, and they're going to take advantage of it, and it's just going to get harder and harder to control. So, seeing my tax money go in that way, especially with how much everything else is costing, it's not a pleasant thought.
Fundamentally, isn't it about like you need to have the guts to be able to say like, I'm going to cut this, and you may attack me, but it's for your own good, basically. No one's willing to do that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, once you start giving people free stuff, good luck trying to take it away. Because what begins as, wow, this is great, got some free stuff, I really needed this. After a while, it's like, where's this stuff? It's my right to have it. So a privilege turns into a right. And that's one of the dangerous things about how big this NDIS has become. But if I can touch on something that's kind of serious about this, and that is like the headline that I'm looking at here: NDIS Minister Bill Shorten said government-funded sex work will be scrapped under reform. That actually is a serious thing. I mean, my heart goes out to people who are profoundly disabled, who can't enjoy one of the wonderful things of life, that is sex. You know, sex is a good thing. It's created by God. And I do really feel sorry for people whose profound disabilities make it very easy for them, very difficult for them to enjoy that with the ease that most other people can enjoy it. I still think it's actually not the right thing for governments to be using brothels and prostitutes to do that. And yeah, I do use the word prostitute. I don't use the term sex worker because I know it's an attempt to legitimize something that I don't think should be seen as a legitimate occupation. I think it's a highly exploitative industry, and I will be the first to say that many women who go into it do it through consent, but a lot of the women who go into it, probably even most of the women who go into it, have very broken backgrounds, use drugs to get through it on a daily basis. This is not a good industry for governments to be supporting, and I think most of us know that this is not a good occupation for a woman to be engaged in. I'm not aware of too many fathers whose aspiration for their daughters or for their sons is to go into prostitution. We kind of, even those who use these things, they wouldn't want their own children engaged in this. And so I think it's, as much as I do actually feel for those who have used these services because owing to their disabilities, I think it has the unfortunate effect of legitimizing an industry that I don't think should be seen as legitimate. And therefore, I think it's actually a good thing that funding for that has been cut.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that when the NDIS first came around, I got a friend of mine who's got her brother was disabled, and she's Dutch, and she was telling me that for 25 years or so, this her brother has been looked after, and they've had this kind of our equivalent NDIS for years before it even started. So I think there's definitely a place for it, for the NDIS, for to look after it. But when they kind of rolled it out, to me it just stank of the same thing. You remember the pink bats when they rolled out? It was just done in such a it was just being rorted left, right and centre. People actually died from the pink bat thing. And I think the NDIS, I heard something the other day, they said I think there's 1 million on welfare and there's like 700,000 people on the NDIS, and you think, gee, 700,000 people, assuming those numbers are correct, that is a lot of people that have problems that where were they before? How did they? And so I think what's happened is it's just being rorted at so many different levels, and it's becoming such a debt. And you think about the Medicare. I think I read somewhere not long ago that it's almost getting up to the numbers of Medicare. That is the amount of money that's serving, Medicare for all Australians. I mean, it's just too much, and they've got to clean it up and actually just give. I think the intent was correct in the beginning, which was actually caring for people that really needed it, but it's just become a complete rort in all different areas within the NDIS.
I will. That actually brings up a good point. I do think our country and our people are getting a lot sicker, and I think a lot of that comes from government nutritional advice. I mean, if you looked at the pandemic and what happened, we didn't get any health advice. All we got was pharmaceutical advice. Where was the get out and get some sun, go out and exercise. Make sure you're eating healthy foods. Make sure you're supplementing with vitamin D or vitamin C. The little things that really do make a difference and have been shown to help. None of that advice at all. And it's just it.
And still.
Yeah, and still. And it just shows that the government really isn't interested in health.
And also,
I was just saying, and the population just continues to get bigger and sicker.
Yeah,
and also kids growing up. Like I've got a friend of mine who's up in Queensland, and she's got 2 kids, and they're both on the NDIS because they've got, with all the peanut and all these allergies and ADD and stuff which 20 years ago just I'd never even heard of.
Yeah.
But like all these kids now are growing up with all these. A friend of mine who was she's a teacher, a young girl actually, at a barbecue about a year ago, and she had her first event as a teacher, and they went away for the weekend kind of thing, and she said the tray of table of pills for all of these kids at this thing, it was just literally there wasn't one that didn't have a bunch of pills.
If you look into this, you could actually become an anti-vaxxer.
But yeah, so there, maybe there is that many more people sick now.
And it's so obvious, isn't it? I mean, it's so obvious that there is something wrong with so many kids these days. And everyone knows it. It's an elephant in the room. It's the emperor without his clothes. But you're not allowed to just ask a question like, why are so many kids getting sick from peanuts?
Yeah.
Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And look, another one, and it's very sad, but so many children now diagnosed to be on the autistic spectrum. Why is this happening? Now some say, oh, well, we're better at diagnosing now. I don't think that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you just...
And to make matters worse, on YouTube and even the professionals in this space, they say, this is what we're seeing in the data, and YouTube is like, no, you can't even have the debate in Joe Rogan. It's like, you guys make me sick, and you're enabling, and one day there's going to be lawsuits flying, but they think they're untouchable.
Yeah,
I think they're untouchable,
and we just want to know what's wrong with our kids.
Yep.
That's it. It's not even a political agenda. We just want to know, why are kids dying from eating peanuts? Why are so many children born on the spectrum? What is going on? Help us. No, can't talk about it.
I know I'm sounding old, but when I grew up, there was no kids with any pills anywhere.
Yeah,
there's nothing like that.
Yeah,
even
exactly.
I was only born in 1978. There were no allergies like that among my sort of peers.
Yeah, that's shocking. You mentioned with the sort of mass immigration, too many people coming in. This new story out of news.com, Sydney's set to be transformed with new micro-cities, including high-density housing and commerce entertainment precincts. This is going to be how they basically cram everyone into the city. They're doing these mass rule changes where if you're a certain amount of 100 metres within a train station, they're going to automatically upgrade you to Zone 3, Zone 4. Anyone that's been in property development knows what you mean by that. Your classic suburban areas is R2. Anything that's R3 depends on the area, what the definition is, but it's basically high-rise at like around about 8 stories or more. And R4 is like massive, like that's like Parramatta-sized sort of buildings and higher. But they've got these high-growth zones, these micro-cities, what we're calling, so Sydney being the main city, Parramatta being more of like a in-between city between Penrith and the city. These micro-cities centered around these high transport hubs to cram in these 30,000 new homes. These are just the first 3 places of many. Kellyville, Bella Vista, and Macquarie Park. They want to get as many people into Sydney as if it wasn't bad enough, with them reducing the traffic, with the speed, with all of the councils just pulling their heads out of their butts with regards to getting things through with approvals. It's a nightmare. And there is no serious reforms with this. Rather than go out west or north or south, they're not doing any of that. I don't know how to. And again, I'm from property. I have no idea exactly how to fix this housing crisis, but I am very open to anyone that's listening, and you guys on the panel, if you've got any solutions about how to improve this.
Yeah, well, again, this just brings back, like, I mean, it's about the 15-minute cities, the smart cities. If you cram that many people in, you can't have them having cars. So again, changing the speed limits, putting them next to train stations, so it forces people onto public transport, allows them to control where they come and go, because the only way is up. Because if we go out, which is crazy because our country is so big, what is wrong with creating more cities along our coastline? We've got a massive coastline. There are not that many cities along there. You could easily set up industries and enterprises along our coastline, connected by a highway, connected by trains, get people spread out and create healthy living conditions. But they don't want that. They want people crammed into small spaces. Again, that's, losing our land rights, giving away our land. So you cram people into these cities, but if you cram them in, you've got to control how they move. You've got to control where they can come and go. And again, you're going to start seeing a lot more of the smart cameras out there, so they can keep an eye on who's going where. It won't be long before we get the ULEZ cameras that they've got in the UK that are currently causing a lot of problems, because, again, making it more and more inconvenient to do anything other than use public transport is what they want to do. The roads would be way too congested if everyone in one of those apartment buildings had a car. So they don't want you to have a car, and I would not be surprised if these buildings aren't built with garages underneath.
Oh, absolutely. And look, there's nothing really secret about any of this. This is the thing. I mean, many of us would have heard of the UN Agenda 2030, which is all about creating a new society that is environmentally sustainable, that is meant to be economically responsible, which sort of will probably involve a shift from an ownership economy to a renting and leasing economy. It's also meant to be about equity and inclusivity and that kind of thing. And the WEF is on board with this. And this is not a conspiracy, or if it is, it's an open conspiracy. And what you have is these organizations like the UN, the WEF, and they're great networking organizations. And people go to their summits. They get all sorts of ideas, and then they come back to their countries and they meet other people who are interested in these ideas. They attract funding for these ideas, and they start over time rolling them out and implementing them. So a lot of this is part of a kind of international effort, mainly with the justification of sustainability. And it is absolutely about control, because if you're going to demand that people behave in such a way that they are meeting your environmental expectations and your expectations about how they should relate to other people in terms of inclusivity and diversity, then you cannot allow them to be free, because free people don't necessarily conform to your pattern. And so you have to set these rules up for them and basically get them living like little battery hens. There was
easier to surveil them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's Jeremy Bentham's. There was a very famous philosopher in the 18th and 19th century. His name was Jeremy Bentham, and he designed a prison that only needed one guard. And the design of the prison was that in the center of the prison was one guard. All the prisoners were in a circle. He was in the center, and the prisoners were facing away from him, and no prisoner ever knew when they were being watched. And so they behaved themselves without the need for violence, and they learned to discipline themselves. And that is essentially what modern society has become. It has become Bentham's panopticon, where we never know, we kind of always know we're being watched. And that has just made us docile and used to being told what to do. Oh, I can only drive 30 Ks now. Okay. I guess it's for the best. I'm sure there's some study that justifies it, and I trust the science. I'm not a crazy anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, well, it's one of the really clever things. I mean, again, this is one of the reasons the Libertarian Party's running at the council level, is by putting a lot of these smart city, 15-minute city, these zoning changes through the local councils, it brings a lot less scrutiny than if it was being done at state parliament or even federal parliament. Because, you know, a lot of the bills that go through there, if someone sees it like from the right and they're like, hey, what's going on here? They'll bring it up and they'll do some videos and people will start asking questions. It may not stop it or change it, but it makes people become a lot more aware. When things happen at a local council level, you really don't hear much about it. It just kind of happens in the background. There's not as much scrutiny. There's not as it's much easier to pass these changes because the government, the state government, is supporting it. They want it to happen, but you know, it's like, oh, we're not doing it in effect, even though they're kind of pushing for it to happen. And so, before you know it, it's all in place, and suddenly people are like, oh, when did this happen? I don't remember any of this. And as I said, it's a very clever strategy to push it through those local councils because it'll catch a lot of people unaware. So that's, again, you know, one of the reasons we need to get in at all levels, even though local council technically isn't a level of government. It is under the state government. It still is a form of bureaucracy that we need to keep an eye on. That's why we need to, you know, have people that understand what's going on, that care about the community at the local council, at the state and the federal levels. So people need to kind of get in there, be involved and pay attention to what's happening.
It's shocking. Like in the time you guys have been speaking, I was just like wanted to write down, okay, because for me, having come from the industry, I'm like, how do we actually fix this?
Yeah.
And I think you get at least 50% there by diagnosing the problem. And these are just some of the things I wrote down. I will hold a panel on this at some point. Dedicated people, you know, that are actually from the industry that have been in for decades. But you've got state, federal, and local all involved in this. So you know it's going to be stuffed. 3 different sorts of governments. You've got the interest rate problem. You've got the complete building supply chain problem where because of COVID and because of what happened, I saw firsthand in 2020 when I was still in the industry how expensive things got because we don't make things in Australia anymore. Everything just got way more expensive in terms of building. It completely stuffed up the building supply chain and pipeline. And to make matters worse, we've got the environmentalists that, you know, if they find some kind of frog, it puts everything on hold for months, years, who knows how long.
Unless it's for a wind farm.
Yeah. Or even like some kind of, you know, some kind of little tree or sprout or something, you know, some herb. You've got the Aboriginal people wanting their piece of the action as well. And it's a complete rort. They find a little, maybe a spearhead or something, I don't know. And they're like, okay, hold everything. On top of that, you've got people that are actually, we've got mass immigration, many of which are driving up the cost of the market, especially the Chinese, God bless their souls. Many of them are fleeing China and trying to find a safe haven for their money. It's stuffing over the young Aussies that have been here forever and their parents have been paying taxes. We've got people moving, hundreds of thousands of them are moving out of Victoria into the northern states, especially Queensland. They're skipping New South Wales. They have that much trauma from COVID. They're moving to Brisbane, buying all these houses, making it harder for people in Queensland that have been paying taxes for generations. On top of that, I'm not done. On top of that, you've got, you know, a whole bunch of people that are actually really unhappy with the market with regards to the quality. We've got builders that are cutting edges because it's scarce. You know, they've had 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth. My dad used to say, you see all these tradies, Joel? He said this in 2016. They're doing well now, but wait till, you know, the crap hits the fan when things aren't so good after the last 30 years. That's when the true, you know, truly successful people are going to come out. I bet that's not even everything. And I don't know how to fix it. I have no idea how to fix it. And I just see you've got local, state, and federal, and you can't even get anything passed through local. I mean, you can't even get a swimming pool passed through local. And they don't care. They've got a massive, one of the highest turnover rates in any government level. If you guys have any answers on this...
I mean, that's one of the Libertarian Party's policies is to cut that red tape and the planning requirements and bring it right back, you know, so... Because the whole purpose of the local councils doing this is to benefit the community. Not to benefit them. It's not to make things more difficult. It's to create a better environment for the community. So, you know, that's one of the things we need to do. We need to cut that red tape. We need to make it... stop making it so hard for people to do these things, to build these developments, because, you know, as you said, we need them. We're in a housing crisis. We need to get things sorted. Even doing something like putting a granny flat in your backyard because you want to bring some relatives who can't afford to rent or buy at the moment, you can't do it, or not easily. It's a big problem. So
Shocking.
it's bureaucracy, it's red tape, and it's not necessary. It's because the governments are getting too big and getting too power hungry.
Absolutely. I've got a friend who's got a granny flat in his backyard, and he can't use it. He's not allowed to fix it up. It's ridiculous. I've got a few things I keep coming back to in terms of housing. Housing prices, because I think actually housing prices may be the biggest crisis facing this country. And I think nothing will make the younger generation of Australians more cynical about this country, and make socialist utopianism more attractive to them than the fact that they cannot own their own houses. Give the ordinary person the ability to own their own house, and they're much more likely not to be fooled by socialist fantasies. If there was one good thing that came out of COVID, it was working from home. And I think there's something in that if people can work from home more, they can live further away from the cities. Because what we need to do is find a mechanism for allowing people to buy their own homes, but which doesn't push prices up and which actually brings prices down. So both the parties have their own solutions, but those solutions are going to have the perverse effect of pushing prices up. So Labor says, we'll lend you money as a government. Well, as soon as real estate agents and sellers know that you've got some extra money, the prices are going to go up. The Liberals' response is, you can tap into your super. Well, again, as soon as realtors and sellers know that you've got your super behind you, the prices will come up. So we need a mechanism that doesn't do that. One of the ones that I can think of, other than more people working from home, and also decentralizing the public service and not having all the jobs in the city, like put some of them further out west, put some of the public service departments out west where people can buy cheaper houses rather than all of them in the CBD. It just doesn't make any sense from the housing point of view. But to tap into something that Elvis said earlier, fast speed trains all around Australia. So you can get from maybe past Goulburn to Sydney for work in maybe an hour and a half, or even an hour. So I think
people drive longer than that.
They drive longer than that.
From the inner west into
exactly.
the city, yeah.
This is a massive country. It's a huge continent. And of course, a lot of it's desert. We're not under any illusions. But if we could get serious about fast rail systems that would allow people to live hours by car, but much faster by rail outside of the CBDs, that's a way of people being able to buy their own homes, and prices wouldn't go up, they'd come down.
Well, as I said, that's one of the things I think is grossly underused, is the ability to create satellite cities.
Yes.
Like you said, similar to Wollongong and Newcastle, but put some in between these cities. So, and then, like you said, move the services, move businesses and governments out to these places so people want to live there and can live there. And it's not just, work from home. If you have industry there, if we can bring back industry, I mean, one of the largest iron ore suppliers in the world, miners, like we have so much of it, yet we send it overseas to be processed, and we buy it back at something like 1,000 times the cost of what we sell it for. And we shut down all our most of our steel making mills. Like that just is insanity. And again, this will come down to the cost of energy. Because if energy is expensive, then everything we produce is expensive. We can't have any industry that produces stuff in Australia if energy is so expensive. And that comes down to shutting down our coal power stations and going to renewables, which requires so much more land. I mean, all that land, instead of putting wind farms on, we could be putting cities in. Or instead of putting, solar panels and transmission lines, we could be putting fast trains in. And then, like, if you really feel like coal's not the answer, nuclear is, but keep your coal going until we're able to establish nuclear power. Once we have safe, reliable, consistent power at a cheap rate, we have all the resources. It's one of the reasons we're called the lucky country, is because we have so many resources available to us. Don't give it away. Let's use it here.
What's South Africa doing now? Importing water from Zimbabwe and also a bit of energy or something?
Yeah, they're actually, the electricity supply is an absolute disaster. I think it's something like it's almost the amount of the GDP of the whole country. It's such a debacle, and nobody wants to lend them any money. But I think here, Australians, I think, when Tucker came over here, Tucker Carlson, he was just shocked at the price of energy. He's like, and one of the things that came out of that is, that I got out of it, was him saying, Australians just have to say no and demand more and stand up and don't just accept what you're getting handed. And I think that's obviously limiting the amount of people that are coming in is, or controlling it better, which is what we used to do for years. And now it's just the gates open and people are flooding in, the prices are going up. I drove down, we're talking about cities and stuff. I drove into Sydney last week. A friend came down from Brisbane. And I haven't been in the city for ages. Literally, there was you can't park anywhere in the city. The only place you can park is in a Wilkins parking, and it's like $25 an hour. So no one will take a car into there.
No.
And so it's completely...
Again, make things difficult, make it more expensive, make them take public transport.
Yeah.
You can't even drive down George Street here in Sydney anymore.
No.
I mean, every road was blocked. Like just to get in and out of the place. They had bollards everywhere. It was an absolute disaster.
One way, no right turn, no left turn, go back.
No.
Do not collect $200. It's
right.
crazy.
It's shocking.
But I think you've nailed it. At the end of the day, all this, the housing and everything, it all comes back to energy costs. And it's so, one of the things, again, Tucker was saying is, and one thing that I've noted coming here is that in Australia, there's a duopoly in the food market, in the banking, you go across all the different sectors. It's like one of the only countries that I've seen where there's these kind of duopolies and monopolies where we're paying way over the top on literally everything compared to the rest of the world. And Australians are just like, oh, okay, that's what it is. And when you get someone from the outside that comes in and looks at it and goes, what? You're paying this for what? And you guys are okay with that? It was like, when are you going to start saying no?
Yeah. It's shocking. And to make matters worse, I mentioned federal government as well. Where are the country building projects? Like, where is the Bradfield Scheme? If you don't know the Bradfield Scheme, I've got it on my. I've been talking about this for years, and it's been around even longer, way longer. This map of the idea to green the centre of Australia, so we can do those cities, so that we can actually get all that excess water from the Northern Territory or North Queensland and actually channel it all the way down to green centre Australia and actually bring more people in. We could feed literally the world with the amount of land we've got. Like, we have that few people per capita. The idea that it's Sydney versus Hong Kong, a country which is like waterlocked. The idea we have so much land in this country and we've got just asinine idiots running our government, it really annoys me, especially from the property development side. And what about Project Iron Boomerang? Why aren't we actioning this? The idea of this particular project, if you look into it, Senator Malcolm Roberts has talked on this. It's the idea of basically getting all the minerals from Western Australia and doing it, basically putting it on trains and refining it ourselves across the northern part of Australia, rather than mining it, sending it overseas, getting another country to refine it, them send it back as a finished product. It's completely nuts. It's
insanity.
Our government, I can't begin to tell you how homicidal they make me sometimes. But the idea that the cost of property is locked in the way it is, it doesn't have to be this way.
And what about the interview? I was just having a conversation actually last night, and watching Channel 7, I rarely do, but it was all, in the last week, it's all pixelated, and I'm sitting in Sydney, it's at 2024. The TV that's connected to the internet is not even working on the thing, and it was actually happening at my mate's house as well. And so he was just having a conversation saying that these, so if you think about moving people outside of the cities, is our internet up to the task of that?
Is it up to the task of it in the city?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I'm like in the northern beaches, and it's not even working in my place, and I've got the NBN. So that's another, in my view, like a pink bats. It's not a good. We get a little bit of rain, and then suddenly the thing gets all pixelated and you can't even, watch a TV, and you think, we're in 2024. And this guy I was talking to is in the medical field. He was saying that they're doing, in places in the States, they're doing operations via the internet globally, all around the world. But Australia, they can't do it because our latency is so poor. And so if we need to move industry outside, or if we've got to have good internet in order to do it. And here, it rains, and then suddenly that's how bad it is.
Well, thank God for Elon Musk, because people like Graham Hood use Starlink, and it allows people in Africa, really anywhere in the world, to use it.
Oh, I was actually looking at that recently.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's not bad. I'm kind of waiting till they've got some decent speeds. They're not bad. I was looking for a slight up in speed, but definitely, I mean,
eventually, I think they will. I think they will.
It's easy, it's simple, it's available, and if we start getting censored the way I'm kind of expecting things to head, I'll probably end up getting Starlink with a nice VPN.
Yeah, why not?
If I don't make it illegal.
One of our video editors uses it. So if it's good enough for that, we are barely covering any stories at this stage, but I'm thoroughly enjoying the discussion, because we are talking about the things that are bugging people, which is why I wanted to have this particular panel in. Before I get to the next story, though, Stephen Shavira responded to a hilarious comment last night. Someone said to our panel last week, none of you guys have a job. You're all just commentators. And Stephen's like, we literally all have jobs.
That's right.
Literally. Like I'll honestly say that I haven't, but this guy said have never had a job. And I was like, mate, no, you're definitely wrong. You're definitely wrong there. But gym owner, business owner, app creator, Dr. Stephen Shavira is literally a professor, lecturer, book writer.
We don't make money off this, we work for a living. You were in the construction industry until you weren't. It was such a weird comment that someone was making, that the people on the panel, none of you have ever had a real job. It's like, of course we have. How do you think we pay the mortgage?
It's not like we're the Prime Minister of Australia.
That's right, with that $200 a week.
I normally
noodles.
don't care. That doesn't include the flights, by the way. That was just the food. But I
the
don't.
Thing is, if your country's not going in the direction you want it to go, you can just sit back and do nothing, or you can actually contribute and try and make a contribution to change.
I don't usually respond to comments because I get so many, and I'm like, look, whatever. But this one was so hilariously wrong. Last week, just to defend, forget about Stephen and I, we're fine. But just to defend the other people that were on the panel, we had Jeff Grimshaw, who is literally, he's a business owner. He's someone that's written many books. He's a very intelligent guy. You've got John Ruddick, who is literally the what does he do? Lending. He's like a mortgage broker. And then you had Chris Scoveries, professional photographer. I was just like, hey, I don't know where you come from, just sort of seeing what hits the wall. Anyway, keep the comments coming. You guys, you made my night. I almost responded to it, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I
noticed you liked my response. I thought,
I was this close. I was this close to writing everyone's CV. And then I was like, this is actually not worth your time, Joel. And I was like, okay, let's move on. But it was hilarious. Please come back for more so we can talk about you. Breaking apart what happened in the UK election, Nigel Farage managed to establish that beachhead he promised. The Reform Party have secured 5 seats. Why are we talking about UK politics? Because when things happen in the UK or the USA, they tend to happen in Australia, because these are experiments on similar English-speaking countries, especially ones that have founded Australia and also have a cultural impact in the US sense. Nigel Farage managed to get 14% of the vote, the third highest vote across the country, but unfortunately he only won 1% of the seats. Now these MPs, these 5 MPs, it's roughly a little under 1 million votes per MP. If you compare that to the other parties, the Liberal Democrats Party, which is a much more left-wing party over in the UK, they won with 3.5 million seats. With 3.5 million votes, 72 seats, versus Reform UK's 4 million votes for only 5 seats. And Labour, with their almost 10 million votes, won 412 seats. In Australia, we're playing on relatively easy mode. In the UK, Nigel Farage is playing on hard mode, because they have this thing called first past the post. That involves essentially, rather than, when you get your ballot and it's got all the candidates on there, rather than voting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in terms of preference, and if your first guy in doesn't get in, the second guy goes in until you get to the bottom, over there, you got one vote. You put a cross on it. They count crosses over there, unlike in Australia with our referendum. You put a cross next to the person that you want to vote for over there. And that's it. If that person doesn't get in, so you could literally have 10 candidates, they all get less than 10%, but if you got 10%, that guy wins. That's the guy that wins, whoever gets the most. Now, that is the problem. They don't have senators, whereas, in Australia, we have senators.
Well, they have lords. The difference is, which is kind of the equivalent of this element, but they're selected, they're not elected. So obviously...
Literally.
Yeah, they're literally selected. There's no choice. They get hand-picked for that
by the
role,
Prime Minister.
By the Prime Minister.
As well.
So, how impartial is that going to be?
Yeah.
Whereas at least we have two different voting systems. We have the preferential at the lower house and then proportional at the upper house. So it gives us some kind of little bit more control and opportunity. We have the chance to control our vote. Whereas, as you mentioned over there, part of the problem why they did so well with so many votes but didn't get so many seats is because they came second in so many of those seats.
Yeah,
and the other party that was third was also a Conservative party, but because they couldn't preference, I have no doubt Reform would have probably won a lot more seats if they'd had that preferential option, because Conservatives were the 66% versus the 33%, which was the Labor Party. So with preferential, we probably seen a much more conservative government. But because they came second in so many seats, they didn't get the seats. And the reason the Liberal Democrats and some of the other parties did so well is because they ran targeted campaigns. They didn't run in every... Well, they had certain seats they knew that they do well in. They put most of their top candidates in those seats. They focused on those seats because that's what they wanted. So they got... more votes in a smaller area versus Reform, which got more votes across the entire country.
Yeah.
They've been around longer than Reform as well.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, they're older than Australia, which is nuts.
Well, the Conservative Party, that's
Party.
right, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's amazing. I think the only thing Farage is really going to be able to do, because certainly over the next 5 years, they're not going to change the voting system. The current Labor Party has absolutely no interest in changing the system, and that's in a sense why these systems don't get changed.
What do you mean? They said they're ready for a great reset.
Yeah,
they do want to add more.
They're not going to reset that.
They do want to add more House of Lords members of Parliament. So
yes,
so Starmer wants to do that.
He does. He's basically going to pass some rules that are going to get rid of anywhere between 2 and 250 current Lords. And yeah, he'll almost certainly stack them with his own people. That's something really to worry about. And you guys can sort of weigh in as well. But it just seems to me the only path for Farage to be able to ever sort of make a government with Reform UK, and I hope he does one day, is basically try to entice as many of the Tories who lost their seats over to Reform UK, so they've got some sort of brand familiarity in their areas, and really just try to consolidate his votes in key electorates so he can win a majority over the next 5 years. That just seems to me the only way he's going to be able to do it. And I think he can do it, but I don't see any other way.
Well, I think partly that, obviously, if he can get established politicians, that's always going to help. But he's also on a stage now where he can be a lot more vocal, where more of the people from the UK will hear what he's got to say, and he'll be able to... Obviously, as you said, they just don't have the seats to make change. But if they can kind of say, well, this is what we want to do, this is what should be happening, more of people over there will begin to hear that message. And if things keep going the way they are, they're going to want to listen to that message. And I think that will also help, along with trying to entice actual Conservative Tories across into his party.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this. I can't wait to see where this goes, because he gave the Conservatives a chance. They screwed it up. They screwed up their 80-seat majority. He delivered them in 2019 by not running in key seats that they needed. He kneecapped Labor in 2019. They squandered it, the Conservatives, they squandered it. And now he's like, all right, now we're going to do it my way. He did get the third highest vote. He did. He did come second in, as you were alluding to, 98 seats, which basically, I mean, that means he's coming after Labor essentially.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that he will definitely be the opposition in the next one, if not something else, in government. I think things are going to turn to crap so much in the UK.
I agree.
Couple that with some great, I do have a lot of faith in the British people. I really do. I think that there is a dormant. We don't have this problem as much in Australia because we have mandatory voting, but they have volunteer voting over there. I reckon there's a massive dormant vote waiting to explode there. Only 55 to 60% of them vote. In Australia, I mean, ours isn't that bad. It's 85%. I reckon there's a huge dormant vote that will come out when things truly hit the fan in the next 5 years with the UK.
And he's not popular. He was really the leper with the most fingers. That's why people voted for him. He's not popular. Yeah. And the chances that Labor are going to be able to fix their problems are very, very low, because the problems in England, they're systemic problems. They're not problems that can just be fixed by superficial, give some more money to the NHS. No, there's a problem in England where they're not having children and people are getting older. They're older than they've ever been in English history. And that's what's putting so much pressure on the NDIS. That's the cause of the immigration crisis. We're not having babies. And Labor are not going to fix that. And so what it means is inevitably things are going to get worse under Labor, a government that doesn't have a strong popular mandate. Most people did not vote for Labor.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am.
Are you sure? Because according to these journalists, they're saying, and sorry to cut you off, Caitlin Moran is saying, Keir Starmer has turbocharged my arousal levels. I feel fruity. My friend didn't say why she had to excuse herself from our group chat, but we knew the cabinet. We knew. And here's another one. If you thought it was just her, sorry to the people with kids listening right now. I'm trying to.
They don't understand what you're talking about.
They don't understand. Good. Come on, admit it. You find Daddy Downing Street, Keir Starmer smoking hot. Forget Dishy Rishi. Keir Starmer is the Downing Street daddy. So I don't know. I would argue that it's a vocal.
Yeah, I retract everything I just said. You've disproven me completely.
Facts and logic. But no, this is not good. I mean, the first thing that I heard that is passing essentially is Labor's considering this plan there to release prisoners after 40% of their sentence is served. One of the first to be released under this appears a picture of Matalub. This has also been reported by GB News. So this isn't just, I pulled this photo off Twitter by some random profile. This was confirmed by GB News. They did a segment on this. Soon to be released under the new Keir Starmer early release scheme. Hussein was jailed for raping numerous white girls in Rotherham, a absolutely terrible place where I've heard some horrific stories in Rotherham. He said he posted his picture. Where is the justice in releasing this guy early? This is what you get for what you vote for, guys.
Well, that just reminds me of a story recently where a girl was being raped near a detention centre and pulled out pepper spray to save herself, and she'll be charged.
You're joking?
No.
Where was that? Sorry.
It was in Europe. I can't remember. I think it may have been Holland or so. It was one of the European countries. But she near a centre, 17 years old, was being raped, pulled out pepper spray, which is illegal, just the same as it is here. Yeah. Saved herself, and now she's going to be charged. I mean, it's insanity. The fact that, this is another issue I think which is very dear to my heart, is we should have the right to be able to defend ourselves. Just the fact that we can't have, okay, if you don't want to support guns, pepper spray, simple things like that. It's like, it's not something you can go around harming lots of people with, but it will keep you safe. But we can't have it here. And again, when you start seeing, they talk about violence towards women here in Australia, they're like, we've got to solve the problem. But whoa, we don't want you to be able to protect yourself. That's not what we want to see. We have to do something about it. So we're going to belittle men and talk about, toxic masculinity. No, give them the opportunity to defend themselves. Let them use pepper spray. I mean, I think it should be more extreme than that. I think we should absolutely be able to defend your life, your family, your home, all the way. But at least take that first step. Let women, if you're so worried about violence against women, give them the opportunity to protect themselves.
Yeah.
We got the story actually behind the screen. Not on my one. We've got the 17-year-old girl faces fine for using pepper spray.
Danish.
On
That's
text
it.
in the Danish. Yeah, look, this is in Denmark. The idea that this would happen. I mean, you guys seriously, if you want to lose take it from a Syrian Aussie guy, you got to get your border straight. You got to police it better. We're not perfect, but we've got down pat the illegal immigration for now. We stopped the boats many years ago. You've got to get your crap sorted. You've got to police your values.
I've heard Sweden's having a lot of problems with those sort of issues at the moment.
They're done.
They say it's just,
and they're not allowed to talk about it. They don't release figures on sort of racial statistics on who's committing the crimes because they don't want anyone talking about it. Sweden has just fallen.
And this is what freaks me out about Australia. In the very first show, we covered the fact the Electoral Commission in the next census they're going to stop recording ethnicity data.
That's terrible. That should definitely be resisted. But you brought up the Rotherham rape cases, and that's what made Tommy Robinson famous. And Tommy Robinson exposed that and was talking about it, and what was going on was absolutely horrific. The police were either ignoring it or covering it up. And just like what happened to this young woman, Tommy Robinson, he's the one who started getting in trouble from the law. He's the one who started getting charged with hate speech and things like that. And this is the kind of thing that leads to violence on the streets. When people see this happen time and time again, and the police are not doing anything to stop it, people will start taking matters into their own hands. And that is exactly where England is heading.
Yeah, and it's at that point they will police Islamophobia or whatever, fill in the phobia. They will start policing that. And that is what really annoyed me on October 7th when we saw the attack, the atrocity that happened on October 7th. We saw the response in Australia, the celebrations, and we saw people celebrating in the streets outside the Opera House. And the police, unlike how they treated, all the freedom protesters, many of which were Muslim, they're like, we can't even shut these guys down. They admitted we will not, and we can't shut these guys down. And I thought that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. Find me a premier that's going to actually get this done. Yeah,
especially when they're borderline inciting violence. I mean, when you're out there saying, "Where's the Jews?" That's borderline inciting violence.
Yeah. As someone that stood up for southwestern Sydney during the time where they tried to throw me in prison and they tried to do what they did to me, visited my house 9 times, I was like, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. If you're going to start going after especially Jews in the eastern suburbs, we're not having that. We're all Australians. We're under one flag. If you feel so passionate for one side or another, you go over there and you fight. You go over there and you grab a rifle and you take up your jihad or your whatever, your Jewish fight. You leave that crap out of here. When we came to Australia, we left the old battles there.
That is very important because there was always a kind of agreement among Australians that you don't bring your old hatreds here. And basically everyone accepted that. My grandparents came from Eastern Europe.
Other than during soccer games.
Other than during soccer games between Serbs and Croats. That's right.
As a Croatian, that's why I remember that.
That's it, in Liverpool, I know, around there. Other than that, but that rule really does seem to have sort of gone to the winds since the 1990s. Has been sort of my observation. And now this, like, why are we having this issue where it's coming to almost violence and threats of violence on Palestine? It's
dividing the country. There's on different lines.
People are bringing their gripes here.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm not really religious, but when I hear it, and I think, imagine if you were Jewish in this country, and how you would feel when people are just openly saying that. But where are the other Aussies to stand up and say that's not right, mate? Like, it doesn't matter what the religion is, it's just not right.
It honestly,
and the government just seems to be like,
you can't blame the people here for what a government where they came from is doing. Like, you don't have to agree with what the government over there is doing, but you can't blame the people who are here. They've left. They've come away. They've come here for a new life. So
Even
why?
if they didn't come from there, if they were born in Australia, they were Jewish. They'd never been to Israel. Many of them.
Even more so. They're not even part of it yet. They're still being blamed for it. It's insanity.
I can't begin to tell, because the step once we start playing those games, then they start playing these games, and they start going after.
Well, that's the censorship, as you said. Yeah, and they can censor it and they can control it.
Yeah.
I mean, and this shows how dangerous that envoy for Islamophobia and anti-Semitism will be. That will just be a way for groups to battle and battle one another and use lawfare against one another.
Create more animosity.
Totally. That's all it'll do.
Literally, you see a yarmulke, you automatically you subscribe to Israel's existence, when we all know that's not the case. Oh, you look like Joel. Oh, you must be, on the Palestinian side. I'm going to clock you in the face. King hit you. This is the danger, and this is the problem, guys. Divide and conquer. It's like a lion when he charges a herd and he picks one off. That's what this is. That's the visual representation of what this is. So they can pick you off and get the antler and eat it. And they're going to do it one at a time until there's none of us left.
I think you're right there. Just to quickly on that point.
Yeah, sure.
That we kind of all agreed when we came to Australia is that you leave all that behind and we all become one. And there's this mateship, and it doesn't matter your religion, whatever. It's just and that's what's not happening now. Is that what's happened back there or in someone else's home is now being brought here and lived here. Whereas I agree, as you said, in the years gone by, that was kind of the unsaid thing. Is it's a new start and we're all together.
It's a new start. I like that.
Not a reset.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not a reset.
Just making that clear.
Adam sent in a video from Rebel News, which is basically showing what France is like, which I found actually quite interesting.
Hey everyone! Today I wanted to do a Twitter and to show you the 18 arrondissement here in Paris, in France, and I want you to see what I saw today. You will not believe it. It's kind of shocking.
Paris.
Smell the snails. It goes on, but there's basically, it turns into a dump the further it goes down. I'm not even joking. There were places in Zimbabwe which looked better. So that was Paris. This is now London. A Japanese man's shocked that how few white British people make up the country there.
白人の割合が 36.8?
はい、イギリス人のですね。
はい。いや、もっと多いと思ってたから、パーセンテージって割合は少ないかなと僕は思いました。今聞いて。
そうですね。より多いイメージありましたね。
60から70ぐらいあるかなと思ってました。
3分の1にまで減りましたらどう思いますか？
大変なことやなって、驚く、びっくりする。はい、
もしそうなったらポジティブと思いますか、もしくはネガティブと思いますか？
古い考えはネガティブと思います。
なんでですか？
なんでですか？大阪でも結構旅行者、サイトシーイング観光で来ている人はええけど、住んでる人はそんなに多くないと思うんです。でだからどない言うか3割言うたらもう会う人がほとんどもう外国人の方になったら、日本って大丈夫かなって僕も古い人間やから。
It's old-fashioned to have Japanese people in your city. It's like that's where we're moving it.
Well, it brings up what you said earlier. They're just not having babies in the UK. So how do you support the system? You bring in foreigners. You have to replace the population somehow to look after the older population, which kind of reminds me a little bit what our current government is doing with the same thing with immigration. Is they've brought in more people to make our GDP look better. It's not actually better, but our actual individual share of the GDP has gotten smaller. So we're actually worse off, but by having more people, they can create the illusion of that growth in our GDP, and it's like, oh no, we're on the right track, where it's not. It's just going to continue to steamroll as we move forward.
It's also about keeping wages down as well. I mean, one of the functions of immigration, as we all know, that if you've got a surplus, an oversupply of workers, wages can be kept low. And one of the reasons wages in Australia were were the highest wages in the world throughout about half of our history was because you couldn't find anyone to do anything because we were so far away from everywhere. No one wanted to come over here. And so those who were here, who wanted to be farmhands or who were some sort of labourer or tradesperson, they could charge whatever they wanted because there was really no competition. So immigration keeps wages low. That's one of a lot of this is just driven by big business. And so in America, both parties have kind of colluded with one another to keep the borders open. And that was one of the things that the MAGA movement tried to stop, because the Republican elites liked open borders because it meant you had a whole bunch of undocumented workers coming in. You could pay them whatever you wanted. And then, of course, the Democrats liked it as well because they put faith in the possibility that eventually they'll start voting Democrat.
Bernie Sanders at one point said, it's a Koch brothers conspiracy, what they're doing, bringing out all these cheap workers. The Koch brothers being a big Republican donors for their...
He was right. That was one of a couple of things he was right about. He was right about a few things, old Bernie Sanders, God bless him.
And then overnight the wall became racist.
That's right, yeah. But and this is the thing, no one's got a solution to any of this. Now, Viktor Orban in Hungary is basically scrapping income tax for any family that has, I think, 4 children. But we've really got to come up with really meaningful ways for people to encourage people to have children. Now, this Japanese man, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if he knows this or not, the Japanese population is plummeting. And they're going to wind up the same way. The average family in Japan has 1 child. That's not replacement level. We've got to be having at least 3 children.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Same. China on a slightly different level. They're experiencing a population problem because of the one-child policy, because they had too many people. So they said, well, you can only have 1. So a lot of female babies were murdered at birth or aborted before they were born because everyone wanted a male, because you want a male to carry on your line. So all of a sudden they've got an excess population of men, which means that the next generation's going to get smaller. They got rid of the policy, but they got rid of it too late. And now all of a sudden they're experiencing that problem. And on the flip side to wages, one of the things that happened here in Australia, is particularly with like minimum wage and things like that, there were jobs that we used to have which were never about making a living. So, kids would go and work at McDonald's or supermarket or some fast food joint. They would get paid, $5, $10 an hour, not a lot of money, but they would get work experience. They'd get out there. They would gain experience and knowledge so that once they got out of school into the workforce, they had experience behind them, and they became. But all of a sudden, with these laws, suddenly these jobs, they expected you to be able to have make a living off it. So then the wages went up, and when the wages go up, they don't want these young people in these jobs because they don't have experience. Where these jobs were all about giving them experience, now all of a sudden they're becoming adults. They're going to the workforce. They don't have experience. They haven't worked growing up because there's no opportunities, because no one wants to pay a child an adult wage.
Why would you?
Yeah, and it's just, and it's the opposite end of keeping wages low. It brings up the lower wages high and the higher wages low, and it jams us in this spot that we have difficulty getting out of.
It's the principle of unintended consequences, a key factor in conservative political thinking. That even the best usually the best intentions will wind up with the worst consequences. Raise minimum wage, fine. Doesn't mean you're able to keep all your employees. So you might find out of 10, 6 are being paid better, the other 4 are looking for another job.
On the inverse, we've also got this story about all these millionaires migrating around the world. There's this huge brain drain, money drain from the UK. 9,500 millionaires leaving the UK, going to where? Going to Singapore, 3,500 going to Singapore, 2,500 going to Australia, 3,000 going to Canada, 4,000 going to the USA. China is losing so many millionaires. And again, a lot of people, they see Chinese and they're like, oh, you know, the CCP. There's Chinese people and there's CCP. Now, Chinese people, there's many associated with the CCP, but there's tons of them just trying to get their money out of China. And they're actually trying to run away from the CCP as well. And they are driving prices up here. But if they're going to invest in Australia and build jobs for Aussies, okay, maybe we should look at that, especially if it's not critical infrastructure.
Well, just wait and see what happens with France. I mean, obviously with the recent elections, and they've managed to tilt the vote in the left's favour.
Yeah.
Now they want to bring in a 90% tax on people. I think, is it over $400,000, I think? So all the people with money aren't going to want to hang around paying a 90% tax. They're going to leave the country. What's that going to do to the country and the economy? Now, it could be good for Australia if they come here and they actually invest their money here. But, yeah, it's crazy. Again, it's, work as hard as you want and we'll share your money to everyone else who doesn't want to. It's that socialist ideology, and it's just going to destroy the country. And I'm worried that that's where we're heading as well.
As we said last week when we were here during the election, the people who always wind up paying the price for these moronic socialist policies are the middle class, because the very, very rich people can afford to leave. And the ones who aren't making much money, there's nothing to take from them. So it's the middle class who are making money but can't afford to leave, and they wind up bearing the brunt of all of it.
Well, they end up getting pushed down to the lower class. And this is what you've been seeing over the last couple of years. The middle class is slowly disappearing. We're getting pushed down into the lower class, and the upper class, like you said, they can leave. So they're moving further away. So it becomes harder and harder to bridge these gaps. And that's with all these bloated policies and taxes and all sorts of things that just continuing to build on top of each other and creating more stress and weight on top of, as you said, the middle class, because they're going to bear the brunt of it.
Yeah, small business owners, just people who actually employ people. It's just, typical socialist madness. And as always, I mean, history is learning our lessons the hard way. That's what history is. And I do actually have a lot of hope for Europe. I've got a lot of hope, particularly for Britain. And I've got a lot of hope for Australia. But my view is that things will get better, but they must get worse.
Yeah. I was saying the same thing. I was kind of hoping that it was worse enough now that things need to change, but I think it still probably needs to go a little bit further, sadly.
Yeah, I think the UK's it's going to get worse, with Nigel, by the time he comes back round.
How long are their terms? Are they 3 or 4 years?
5.
Yeah. They can go earlier, though, much earlier.
Yeah.
So sometimes it has to get worse before people actually...
It's definitely going to get worse with that sort of term.
And I think America's maybe there now.
Yeah.
It's all the wheels are falling off. Australia still, I think, has a way to go. But at the end of the day, kids, you got to make it economically, you got to make it so that people feel comfortable and can afford to have kids. So you've got to fix that. All comes back to our power. The same, even things like in the construction industry, your industry there, you've got a guy like just controlling the traffic, getting 150, 200 grand.
Don't go there, man.
Again, it comes back to creating
it's so costly.
A living on a job that shouldn't really be used to create a living. It's just
used to be common sense that would wave the traffic through.
Which you also
were better.
Brought up a good point with the US election. This is one of the reasons I kind of wonder whether we might go into an early election as well. Because if you think about it, if, let's say, Trump wins, right-leaning government, and things improve drastically, it's going to make a lot of people over here go, wait a minute, what's going on? And if that is successful and their economy starts to pick up and their cost of living improves and their inflation drops, then a lot more people over here are going to be questioning that, and that could help us. So the longer our elections are held back, I think the better it is. Obviously, Trump still has to win the election. And I think, look, if it's a legitimate election, I think he will. But if he does win and we wait long enough and we can see the results of what happens when he's in power, it could be beneficial for us. So that's another one of the reasons why I think they could hold an early election over here, because if they time it around the same time, it gives them an opportunity to at least get voted in before any major changes start happening internationally.
I think on the early election thing, there's a few considerations. The US, they do affect us, but I don't think that to that extent. I reckon there's probably probably 7 or 8 other issues, Australian-centred. Labor are in the business of getting in government. I think the top priorities they have is the economy. When's the best time to go with the economy? Are the tax breaks going to be too, should we wait until the tax breaks come and then it's disappointing to people and lose government, or should we do it earlier? Should we do it before or after the Queensland election where it's looking like, we're going to lose it? If we let Labor go in Queensland first, they'll get thumped and people will take their anger out on them and they won't take it out on us. Whereas if we go early, maybe they won't. On top of that, there's the WA election in, I think, March or April next year. So, I mean, there's a lot of considerations.
There's also the new Muslim possible party, because one of the things, if they decide to go ahead and create a party, it actually takes 3 months. But if they see that happening, once the writs are done, all that stops. So they can actually prevent the party from being formed if they call an early election. If they leave it as a late election, there's still plenty of time for them, because it takes approximately 3 months.
Not if there's a sitting MP or senator.
But she has no. But they have. But she's not part of a party. She's an independent. So that
she can easily just. But
can she create? Can they create a party out of? Oh, they can out of the blue.
How did the UAP come about? Craig.
Yeah, but that was still well more than 3 months.
All right.
That was was like 6 or 7 months before, because they approached me back in October of 21, and by January 22, the candidates had been picked, and the election was in May. So that was still 5 months before.
My understanding is, and I got my compliance guy to look at this, if you have a sitting member in the lower house or the upper house, pretty much get immediately registered, pretty much.
Okay.
And
I thought they had to be a member of the party beforehand, not. Okay. Or maybe I'm wrong
because
on that one.
that's how they did it. And they were able to get around a whole bunch of things with regards to the membership requirements, because they had Craig Kelly. That's why they was critical. They got Craig on at that time.
Well, but they had a massive push for members, obviously.
Yeah.
So
but in terms of the checks, in terms of. They didn't have. They skipped all of that.
Okay.
They skipped all of that because they had Craig. That was what that bill was restricting them from when they passed it to change the name of the Libertarian Party. Look, there's a lot to it. I actually want to do a longer segment on this at some point. But this Muslim vote, you're not wrong. The longer they have, the better organised they will be.
Yep.
We've got an independent senator in Senator Payman in WA who's just left the Labor Party. You've got an independent senator in Victoria in. What's her name? She used to be in the Greens in Victoria. She's now an independent. I forgot her name. She's the one that makes a fool of herself all the time.
Not Thorpe.
Lydia Thorpe.
Okay.
So she's another independent, and she totally loves Palestine and totally loves that Muslim issue, obviously on top of her issues, which are the Aboriginal stuff.
On top of her issues.
Yeah, well, yeah. Just a Freudian slip. And on top of that, we've got this Muslim Votes Matters group, which is like, it's like the get up of the Muslim community. And then on top of that, you've got the Muslim Vote, which is another group which might actually get behind these candidates in specifically Western Sydney and some Victorian areas. Labor may go as early as possible in order to actually preempt that.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I think all these are way more important to them than what is going on in America, because they're hanging by a thread. They've only got a couple seats, a majority in the lower house.
Yep.
But anyway,
definitely very interesting. I think
the
next
there's a
couple
lot
of months
there.
is going to be interesting to watch what happens.
100%. Yeah.
I'm looking at the real Clear Politics polls on America, and Trump is leading significantly in 80% of the battleground states.
Right.
He's doing really well.
Right, right.
I mean, at the end of the day, you just don't know.
Yeah.
But he just seems to be doing so well.
Yeah. I was going to say, going on to Biden, and we're getting close to the conclusion of the show, guys. This morning, this is what Joe Biden said. This morning, I sent a letter to my fellow Democrats on Capitol Hill. In it, I shared my thoughts about this moment in our campaign. It's time we come together, move forward as a unified party, and defeat Donald Trump. This is so fascinating to me because Joe Biden simply will not give up the presidency.
I think Jill is kind of making sure he won't give up.
She doesn't want to.
No.
Exactly. So his side, his faction, his family are getting behind it. And on top of that, what's really interesting about this is we haven't seen the Democrats this divided since 2016, Trump versus Hillary, which was actually, before that, Hillary versus Biden. Sorry, Hillary versus Biden. Hillary versus Bernie. They completely stacked it against Bernie, the superdelegates thing and all of that. When I was rooting for Bernie at the time, I was a Bernie bro. I remember how they did that. It woke me up to the Democrat establishment. How are they going to get rid of a sitting president? This is actually how powerful the Constitution is and what they are passing. Yep. They can't just brush this guy away. Now, George Clooney, one of the biggest funders of Joe Biden, it was just announced today, has withdrawn his support and he's encouraging Joe very openly and, privately to him, I guess, chiding him and saying, look,
he did,
Joe,
op-ed. He did an op-ed. And
right.
And literally a month ago, 1 month ago, he raised, I believe,
3 weeks,
$27 million for him. Now, all of a sudden, he's not suitable. I don't want to be rude. Joe has been like this since the 2020 elections. Yes, it's a little worse, but not significantly.
Yeah.
And if he claims to be such a good friend, such a good supporter, knows him really well, how did you not see that first? If you really felt that, like you could see that happening, why did you just raise $27 million? It's because they don't care. It's got nothing to do with Joe as a suitable president. It's about winning. Once that debate happened and they realized they couldn't win, all that support dropped. And that's really all it is. They just want to win. They don't care so much who's at the top. I mean, obviously, they do, like, they need someone that will follow their agenda and they can control and do what they want. But if they get someone who's popular at the top, then they're happy. And like you said, it creates a really interesting situation. They can't get rid of him. And they have the added problem of Kamala Harris as the vice president. So if he drops dead, if he pulls out, or whatever, she becomes the sitting president. And she's not going to want to go either. So that's going to create even more problems.
Yeah.
And she's less popular than Joe is, which...
And more mentally compromised.
Yeah.
She is.
Without the age. No, absolutely.
What's so fascinating about this is we're so used to it being, it was planned. Of course this was not planned. No. There is no, like, the level of foresight, they did not put a lot of foresight into this. And it shows because we're seeing them fight with each other. They're normally, collectivists, whereas it's the right that they're individualists.
I think they suspected it, and I think that's why they pushed the debate so far forward before they've got the conference coming up in August, the caucus, in August. So I think they pushed it forward for this very reason because I think they were starting to become concerned. And I think they really put their foot in it with that. Because, as you said, it's just caused so many problems. They've just become so splintered and divided. Yeah. And I'm so curious. Like, I've never been huge on US politics. I mean, obviously, since I got involved, I keep an eye on it. I like to see what's going on. But now I'm just, it's like reality TV. I can't turn away.
It is. They've painted themselves literally into a corner now. And I mean, I think nobody knows what, even hourly, like even as we're sitting here now, 4 hours ago, there's a different, nobody knows how it's actually going to play out. And I don't think even they do. And they changed their heart. Like 2 days ago, they were like, oh, let's get rid of him. And then they were like, some of them came back and said, no, we're going to back him. And it's right now, even I think it was Nancy Pelosi came out this afternoon and said, he has to pick his time, but he has to hurry up kind of thing. So they've, he said he thought he had until the weekend, but they're like saying...
They're running out of time because there's some states where he's going to miss the deadline to be on the ballot. And that's in August.
Well, that's the
before the actual...
Do we know the date of the caucus?
I think it's like the 9th or something, yeah.
Okay, because I think...
19th, maybe.
I think the party really needs him out if they want to get rid of him before that to have any chance of getting anyone suitable. Because I think if it happens after that, they're stuck with Kamala.
But do you think, though, that if they got him out, do you think the public would go, it would be even... Because what you were saying earlier, you know how they just stitched up Bernie and they just swapped out. And I think, the question is that more damaging, just saying, oh, he's out and we're going to put another person in and you just have to accept this is the new person? I think is that more of a risk than actually leaving him in?
I think the damage has actually been done because the public look, we all knew about his cognitive abilities because we watch the videos on Twitter, but we're not normal people.
You mean the deep fakes they're referring to?
The deep fakes, that's right, yeah. Well, one thing I will say, it's now been definitively proven that is the real Biden. It's not just a man in a mask, because they would never pay someone to wear a mask to put on a performance like that. But no, I think people already are disillusioned because they've realised they've been lied to.
You can't unsee it.
Exactly. But again, sort of just very importantly, behind all of that, a lot of people are now saying, wait a second, you guys were telling us not just 2 weeks ago that Biden is possibly the most physically robust president in American history. That's what the White House was saying. And now we find out, in actual fact, he's not actually able to barely stand up and talk after 9 p.m. Like, you guys have been lying to the country. So I think actually a lot of the damage has been done. I think trust in the Democratic Party has been lost. And if anyone votes Democrat, it's solely, well, you've still got some true believers out there. They're incurable. That's fine. But I think a lot of people are just going to vote Democrat because they are genuinely afraid that Trump is going to sort of overturn democracy. But I think the trust has already been lost.
Again, I'll say it one more time. It's astonishing to me. I'm learning so much. I'm taking inventory of all the things, all the levers they can pull on a sitting president. These people are that powerful.
Yep.
And I just said, you're getting me thinking in real time on this, guys, because obviously I've been looking at US politics for 8 years now, since from the left, from the right. One of the things, maybe it was planned, and one of the things I'm reconsidering now is, do you remember back in 2020, I can't remember if they passed this, but do you remember there was a press conference, it's in my phone, where Nancy Pelosi was before the cameras, and she said, we're passing this bill to improve the protections on the 25th Amendment so that we can dismiss a president on his mental acuity. This isn't for Trump, she said. This isn't for Trump. This isn't meant to come in until after. Was it for Biden? Did they always know that was going to be needed in the future?
Interesting, because the word on the street is that when he agreed to run as president, his family and extended family were angry at him. Why? Because he had dementia. That's sort of the rumors, that in actual fact he didn't have he had the support of Hunter, he had the support of Jill. But both for obvious reasons. She's very ambitious, and Hunter, well, he wants to stay out of prison as long as possible.
And make a lot of money.
And make a lot of money, that's right. But look, the thing is, he's been choreographed and handled. So he doesn't do interviews where he doesn't know the questions. Yep. He won't generally talk for more than 10 minutes. Of course, it's legendary now. He only really works between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. That debate was at 9 p.m., I think. So that was a big mistake. And now they can't just say, oh, can we bring the debate to 12 p.m.? You can't do that because you're tacitly saying that anything that happens in the world outside of those hours...
You could do what I used to do and have an afternoon nap. Maybe that's a possibility.
I think what's happened is he's dug his ear... Well, not him, because I don't think he's really
He's stubborn.
Lot, but his wife and son have gone, you're not going, you're staying. And he's like, okay, we're staying. But now they've said, I think they've basically said, if you don't kind of resign by the weekend or whatever, then there'll be a whistleblower that'll come up. You know that tape of him when they interviewed him, which Garland is not allowing to come out? There'll be something like that will come out, which will just be so bad. they'll basically say, well, we'll just leak this unless you...
Yes.
That is very plausible.
And that's what interests me.
Yep.
They've suppressed... There are videos of him saying the N-word everywhere, but they suppress... That's what fascinates me. It's like...
Censorship is wonderful.
Yeah, they have it.
Party.
They have all the material ready to go.
Yeah.
They keep it suppressed, but if you stuff up, I will release it and I will amplify it and I will throw the algorithms behind this. It fascinates
What's that going to do to the party? That's got... I mean, because people are going to see that and go, you had to have known.
Yes, exactly.
So
it's going to break... It's going to red pill the nation. That's what... The world. I mean, it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I do think the dark horse is Michelle Obama, which CNN kindly termed Big Mike. I don't know if anyone saw that clip. The guy...
CNN? What happened?
He accidentally
referring to brought up Pelosi and a couple of the other candidates and goes, Big Mike, and he's gone, oh my God, I didn't mean that. I meant Michelle Obama.
No
It was hilarious. I made sure I saved that clip. It was after the debate. It was like only a couple of days or maybe a week or so after the debate. It was, it's in my X feed. So if you want to check it out, jump onto X, look up for the real King Elvis. It's in there somewhere. Just search Big Mike. But yeah, he actually said it on CNN.
Wow.
I'm like, you can't be serious. This guy, he can't have a job after this.
That's right. That's the end of it.
But I think that Michelle Obama is definitely a dark horse, and I think she could, because she keeps saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And if something comes out where they have, the red pill situation where they get rid of him and she goes, I have to step in. I don't want to do this. I'm doing this for my country. A bit like what Trump said at the debate, which I think it could steal the thunder because he's done it now. Yeah. So if she does it, Trump will be able to say she's just copying me. Yeah. But I think that was one of the strongest points in the debate is when he said, I would rather be at home. I don't want to be here, but I have to be. And I think that was one of the strongest moments. And I think if the Trump campaign was smart, they would be clipping the hell out of that and putting it all over the internet, because when he said it, he seemed genuine. And I'm like, damn, you're not wrong. Like, he doesn't need to do this, but he is.
Some people said that they're holding out because they don't want to give a lot of time for if Michelle Obama does it.
Yes, scrutiny.
There's a lot of scrutiny. There's quite a bit of stuff out there, and so they want to leave it to the last moment. But and then she said she doesn't want to. But who do you think would actually be? So maybe she will take up the mantle, get through the thing to try and win it, and then have some medical whatever, but bail out of it at some point, like just to because I mean, who else?
Well, I mean, there's Newsom, but what he's done to California is like, if anyone's smart, you don't want him anywhere near the presidency. There's obviously Pelosi. She's obviously interested, but I don't think she's a smart choice. As I said,
unelectable.
My choice is the dark horse, the Michelle Obama. I believe there are a couple of others in the wings that are interested, but I don't think they have the exposure or personality to at the last second step in and make a statement. So like Joel said, I can't turn away. I want, particularly the next couple of weeks until the caucus, it's going to be riveting because something has to happen. If it happens after then, it's going to be even messier.
And that's
because if it happens after that, it's Kamala.
Yeah. But if it's Michelle, then we're going to see the Zucchini Files, just like the X-Files. So I couldn't help myself, guys. Sorry. But anyway, look, there's a whole bunch of dirt we're going to see come out in the next few weeks, months, and it's just going to accelerate from there.
We didn't even get into the lawfare stuff.
Well, that's right. I think that could be sort of plan B, really ramp up the lawfare, put him in prison. But that could actually raise his vote.
It has. It already has. It's backfired astronomically. He's way more popular after his last conviction. He got the most amount of donations so far in his campaign. Like, if they haven't realized lawfare is not working and it's not going to work, they're morons.
assassination.
Yeah,
It's heading to seriously. That's where it's heading.
The last thing.
It's heading to assassination.
Yeah.
which brings up the VP side of things. So, but I guess maybe we leave this for another day.
Yeah, that was like whack-a-mole.
None of us would be remotely surprised if we woke up tomorrow morning and he'd been assassinated. That wouldn't be remotely surprising.
I don't want to think about it.
This is why I talk about this last, because it's riveting, and it's going to keep getting crazier. I don't watch TV shows in 2020 or in 2016. This is an election year. This is what you can expect, and for some reason, the world loses its mind in the year. There are wars starting which wouldn't start. There's elections on. You know, the UK and France weren't meant to have an election this year, but they both decided to do it early. I mean, this is nuts. Who knows? Albo might do it too.
The really, true. The really dangerous thing about Trump, and everyone knows it, is that if he gets elected, he doesn't need to get re-elected. He's got nothing to lose. He can go after all his enemies if he wants. And that would be very, very frightening to a lot of people.
I think that's one reason Joe and the family don't want him elected, because obviously, Hunter's done a lot of stuff that is not pleasant, I'll put it simply, and I'm sure he'll be a target, and we know that Joe has supported a lot of that. So I think I don't know whether he would. I think he may just let it slide because, but the risk is too great for them.
The Obama, before the debate, Obama was involving himself in the campaign a lot more, and then the debate happens, and we know there's great fissures. As Tucker Carlson tweeted, there are great fissures between the Obamas and the Bidens. It's always been like that. I can totally see Jill and Michelle punching on. And
Michelle would win, just for those wondering.
Sword fight.
CNN agrees.
Yes. But no, look, when I look at this, it is riveting. It's very interesting. It's going to get crazier. And watching the Democrats fight and not be unified, this is how they lost. Because 10% of Bernie Sanders voters in 2016, people like me that supported Bernie, the people like that could actually vote in America. I've never been to America. They voted for Trump. 10% of them that were going to support Bernie because of how he was screwed over by Hillary and how he was appealing to those swing states like Michigan. And that's how he won them. And so... I
was a bit like you. I thought Bernie was the good choice back then. Again, I had tend to have a lot more of a leftist view of things politically, and I was thinking, I thought Bernie. And then when I saw that happen, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, he got a few extra houses. He stopped saying the millionaires and the billionaires, started saying the billionaires. And I was like, we were all like, oh, that's what happened.
Crazy
right.
Bernie.
I thought Trump was a racist. I thought that 2016 election, I was depressed that day. I was really sad he lost.
I wasn't depressed, but I was still like most people, the orange man. Like I was convinced by the media, and I'm like, you're fired. I've seen all these TV stuff, and I didn't dislike Trump either. I actually the first time I fought in the UFC was the Trump Taj Mahal. And I actually briefly met Trump, obviously, before then. And
you just did it like passing. By the way,
you bring this up right now at the end.
Yeah, well, that's a good way. It's a good way to. Again, I was just. It was the first time I fought in the UFC, and it was, as I said, it was in the Trump Taj Mahal, and as part of it, he was there, and I met him. Briefly, I should say, I was in the room. I didn't really. It's not like we conversed or anything.
Because what my next question would have been is,
what did he say?
I didn't.
How big are his hands?
I didn't touch him.
How was he? Did you pull your trap when he did your handshake? Did he pull you in?
No, I didn't get any physical.
Or did you do what Joe Rogan did, where I anchored in? And have you seen that video?
I didn't make any physical contact. Sadly, I regret it now.
Right.
But yeah, I'd seen Trump. He seemed like a cool guy when I met him. When he was there, he was quite pleasant, happy guy, and obviously he was big, as we know now, is a big supporter of the UFC. He's at the events, gets a lot of support, which brings up another point. There's good to see a lot of the fighters out there are aware of what's going on, like, Sean Strickland, one of the ex-champions, Marcano, who I think he's very much a libertarian, and one of the ex-fighters, Jake Shields. So there's a lot of fighters out there that kind of understand what's going on, which is also good to see. But when that election came, as you said, even though I'd met him, it seemed like a really nice guy, was very friendly. Even I'd been kind of tarnished by the media's perception of him as the Orange Man. Again, I wasn't as invested in it, so I wasn't fussed because I wasn't quite the same point as I am now politically. But I'm like, oh, well, they're in trouble now. And hindsight, 2020, I realized that was not the way it was at all. And that's one of the things that had made me realize just how much the media no longer do journalism. They don't present the news. They present a narrative. You know, they have a story to tell, and they're telling you that. They're not telling you what's really going on.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm conscious of your time. I'm going to quick fire these last few ones just as sort of headlines. Pope Francis has basically sounded the alarm on MAGA-like politics around the world. He's saying not enough people are getting out to vote. You know, indifference is a cancer of democracy, he says. I'm concerned about the small number of people who went to vote. Look, no disrespect to the Pope. I'm not Catholic. My mum's Maronite. My dad was Orthodox. I don't believe he's Christ on earth, in my opinion. But the idea that he's getting really involved in politics is interesting at this time.
Well, I am a Catholic, and I really don't think the Pope is any longer representing Catholicism or Christianity. I mean, he recently had like some transgenders in and LGBTQ people in there, and again, it doesn't fit the philosophy. That's not what it is, and he's if anything is trying to use populism or push a narrative, and I don't think he's a representative. So what he says, honestly, as a Catholic, is I couldn't care anymore. He's kind of ruined the facade that they've had up for so long, and as I said, disappointing. I don't think religion and politics should mix. Obviously, there are going to be religious parties as well. That's just the nature of the beast. But I don't think the religion as a whole should be involved, because it's more about values and character, and it shouldn't be based around just religious principles. But obviously, you take those religious principles, and they should shine through who you are as a person, and I think that's more important when we're looking at who should be representing us.
I'll quick fire through the next one. Thanks for saying that. No ID required. This is a map which shows where no ID is required. Basically, the grey areas are no ID at all. The yellow areas are no photo ID required specifically, and photo ID is required in the blue states. And as you can tell, that if you didn't know, the blue states you can see here, they're actually the Republican states that have photo ID laws down pat. They are actually checking people that are voting. And the last thing I will show you guys as a part of the main show, I have a ton of things. I realized. Do you guys have time? I want to be respectful of your time. We've probably got about 10 minutes left. Are you all good?
I'm good.
Okay, good. I didn't want to be rude.
I'll bill you for it afterwards.
Very good.
This is how we make our living.
Literally.
We don't work.
Literally.
We're not. We're just panelists here.
Yeah, good. Well, I sensed you're enjoying it, and I wanted to just get your consent. Ben Shapiro went before the Congress just today, and he actually ended up speaking alongside one of the representatives from GARM. Now, you've never heard of GARM before. GARM is the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. These guys, if I can explain it to you guys, if you're not sure who these guys are, Ben Shapiro did a phenomenal facts video on it about GARM. They are basically the gate that has partnered up. Think of them as the Great Wall of China. They're the gate. And the towers that make up this wall are big tech. They originally partnered up with Twitter before it was X, before Elon came in, Facebook, so Meta, Instagram, TikTok, and some of the other big ones like YouTube and Google. And they police whether I get monetized, whether any online content creator gets monetized, whether we get all this funding. And on the other side of the wall is all the advertisers out there, all the big ones. 90% of the funders of ads that are out there basically are members of GARM, and they will whether the gate comes up or not from this organisation, they will funnel funding to us. Or if we're not towing the party line, the ESG line, the friendly climate change or immigration or LGBT line, they won't give it to us. But similarly, if one of those organisations aren't actually playing by their rules, they won't allow them to advertise through us either. So it goes both ways, interestingly. Ben Shapiro, giving you the context, he was in the actual Congress talking about this, and I did just a 2-minute supercut of some of his comments in there and what was said. This is the head of GARM right here explaining what he was saying, and you'll see a few members of Parliament speaking as well. Yeah, it's the haircut.
Definitions to try and make order of something that quite honestly had no order to begin with.
Well, here's what GARM did. Here's what it looks like, I think, in practice. Can we put up the email from Mr. Montgomery, who works for Mr. Jewell's company? The email about Breitbart, the Daily Wire, and Fox News. There's an interesting parallel here with Breitbart. As much as we hated their ideology and blank, we couldn't really justify blocking them for misguided opinion. I don't know the Daily Wire that well, but we should watch them carefully too. If we block the Daily Wire, why wouldn't we block Fox News? That seems to me like uncommon collaboration in practice, focused on 3 conservative news outlets. You see it that way, Mr. Jewell?
Respectfully, no, sir.
Well, how do you see it then?
I see this as somebody from our brand safety team, and he's asking questions about what sort of standards of service they have and trying to figure out what is happening with that particular publisher.
Mr. Shapiro, it's been cited several times. I think Mr. Natter said this in an opening statement. A number of other people said that they come together, they collaborate, they collude, they come together because they don't want to be advertising on sites where there's terrorism, piracy, harmful images of children, or other crimes on those associated with those websites. Any of that activity take place on the Daily Wire website?
No, it most certainly is not.
Yeah. So that's just, we're all against that stuff. What we're not for is this colluding, this collaboration to go after to limit advertising because you don't like their ideology, you don't like their politics. That's what we're focused on, and that's exactly what's going on out there. And frankly, as you said in your opening statement, anybody can see it.
Yeah, the emails that you're showing, I've yet to see an email on the other side suggesting the possibility of divestment from CNN, for example.
Yeah, we and trust me, we did a lot of investigating. We'd have had that, we'd have put it in our report.
Jim Jordan's great. So we got demonetized on this channel. We won't have the opportunity to apply again for a while. When we applied, harmful content. This is how it affects us. So if you guys are watching on YouTube or whatever platform, Instagram, click the link in my bio, click the link in the description, become a regular donor. Cup of coffee a month. It goes a long way. The numbers we are reaching with this show is 600,000 on average every show. So if you guys did $1 a year, it would be more than I need. I could fund literally every project that we're doing. But at this stage, monetization doesn't just affect getting money for me and the podcast and funding the lights and everything. It actually also it downgrades what we're doing as well with regards to our reach. Ben Shapiro goes on to talk about that. And on top of that, GARM, as I said, 90% of the advertisers go through them. Shapiro has copped on his channels 4,000 of these. 4,000 of these strikes. Across all the Daily Wire ones, they've copped 4,000 of these where they've had videos taken down, demonetization of people like Jeremy Boring. Sorry, not Jeremy Boring, the guy that did the What is a Woman?
Yeah.
Matt Walsh, sorry, thank you. Matt Walsh. This is actually shocking, and this is something that I've been railing about. I've only written 3 articles publicly and published them because they're not as good at getting the message out in the videos. 3 of them have been about this topic. 3 of them have been about this topic because it's so important in terms of what's being done. And the Conservatives are completely quiet. There's nothing stopping Australia from passing a bill in order to actually protect free speech in Australia, but they're not even thinking on that level. The last thing I'll play for us, did you guys have any really hot takes you wanted to have on what you just saw with Ben?
Well, the only reason I'm aware of it is I saw it recently on X that they were stating that, they will be following those policies. It's the first time I'd heard about it now brought up today. So again, if you can't donate, like, comment, share
thank
the
you.
videos as well. That's another great way, because if we can increase the reach, then that gives us a greater opportunity as well. And again, as you said, it comes down to these censorship policies which are coming in place, and they're slowly being put into our government policy, so they can take control of what we see and hear, and that can be very detrimental to us as a community.
And I'll say this before I forget. On top of that, so YouTube approve and not approve ads. The only way to sell anything nowadays, it's not the newspaper, it's not TV. It is pretty much, Google is the vast majority of how to make sales, do targeted marketing. There's thousands of points of identity on people. When we were running the Donald Trump Jr. tour last year and advertising it, Google thought our advertisements were for Donald Trump. So they stopped it for 5 weeks. They stopped it. The ticket sales plummeted because I was like, how do you reach people? That's how you advertise. They stopped it for 5 weeks before we even had it up. And then a couple, 2 weeks out from the thing, back up again, no worries. That's just one, it'll take me years to tell you the amount of ways they screwed us around in that tour. But that's just one of many. Now, Donald Trump, in this particular congressional talk, one of the senators, one of the House of Reps members, actually said, why are we taking Donald Trump ones down? And he said, well, our advertisers, didn't want to associate with. You're messing with the election. The people that write the laws that protect you, you're messing with elections. It's a big no-no. And the Conservatives are asleep at the wheel. That's where we're at. But Ben did a phenomenal job. You may not agree with him on anything. You won't find anyone you agree on anything, including your wife. But Ben did the right thing in this. I listened to the whole thing, the whole 3 hours. He did a very good job. The last video I'll play is this from Maajid Nawaz. Been listening to him for a very long time. He warns of a global palace coup. Whoops. Where is the sound? That's not good. Sorry, everyone. I guess you'll have to wait till next week. There you go for a teaser. And I'll save that one. If you guys haven't gotten the Light newspaper, it's almost sold out for this edition. It's been doing really well. It's been doing phenomenally well getting around the country. I do believe we're getting close to 200,000 prints for this edition, issue 12. The next one's coming out in August. If you want to start putting your orders in, please do get in contact with them at thelightaustralia.com.au. And as you can see, it is very, very cheap for the papers. We're all about spreading the evangelical message. For 3 papers, it's $7.50, but for 2,000 papers, it's $420. Leave them in your local cafe, leave them at your local hairdresser, get them out there. Be really evangelical with it and get the word out. Again, if you're listening on video, screenshot this, get the QR code. This is the one time I'll tell you to scan a QR code. Donate, support the show if you can. You can also see the Light Australia newspaper as well. And lastly, if you could go and follow, we're about to go to 5 more minutes on Rumble and X. There's one video that Stephen Shavira has sent me in. I promised him I'd play it, and I'm a man of my word. So that'll be played on Rumble, X, and Telegram. But if you're listening on YouTube, we're about to love you and leave you. Give this a share, donate, go support these phenomenal people. I've got Adam Dobson, Elvis, I've got Stephen. There are follow links there on X and on Instagram. And I'm about to cut the stream now to YouTube. If we could cut those off right now. In 2 seconds, we're about to do Rumble for 5 minutes. And give me the nod when we're good. But for the rest of you on YouTube, I will love you and leave you.
We're good.
Very good. Very good. For those of you on Rumble and X, hello. The LGBT agenda is taking over everything.